the notice on this is the thing that we posted, because we canceled the May 14th. We posted it at the meeting place. It was going to be continued. Yeah, okay. I just couldn't remember. We talked about that. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Sure, take a picture of it.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be signing an affidavit to that effect if you have to, so.
With?
Sue here, I didn't see her.
I have not seen her.
I don't see her.
How many of the folks do you think are here for that? How many of the folks are here for that? Yeah. More people than I expected. Something's up.
Are we waiting for something?
Yeah, 6:30.
I got 6:31. iPad is 6:32. It's a city iPad, you know.
Good evening, everyone. I call to order the 29 May 2018 meeting of the Victoria City Council. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, on the agenda, item 6C is going to be dropped. Al Olson called the interim city manager and said he is not going to be able to make it. Is there any other amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, I move we adopt the amended agenda, dropping item 6C. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The agenda is adopted. Open forum. I've got a couple of slips here. First, Phil Schultz. If you would, please, for the record, state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Philip Schultz. My wife and I live at 8135 Palmcliff Street, just up the street right here. I'm here tonight because I don't know if anyone here is aware of the issues that are occurring at the stoplight with backups going south on 11. I bought a house on Palmcliff Street a year ago. Beautiful place. I love it here. But the hours of 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., that light backs up. Like I said, trying to go northbound, typically trying to get back west on the Highway 5 and go to Oklahoma. That's the issue. As of right now, I've talked to virtually everyone on the street between 82nd and 81st. If anyone's familiar with that area, just between Lions Park, and it would be one street to the south of Highway 5. Cars come down, they see the traffic backed up, cut up 81st and a half, and then cruise down Palmcliff Street. That intersection between 81st and a half, at 81st and a half and Palmcliff is a T. There's neither a yield nor a stop sign anywhere there. So vehicles are cruising up that hill and ripping by my house.
Hang on just one second. While you're talking, Kara, can we get this pulled up on the map so people can see? 'Cause I'm not sure everybody understands exactly what you're talking about. Give her a second to get it up. And then if you could just speak to it, because if you're over there, we can't hear you on. Kara, could you point out on the map where it is?
So everybody sees Highway 11 right there. The street just to the right or the east is Palmcliff Street. Right there, you can see the ball diamond at Lions Park. And that's 82nd Street running east and west. 81st is the next street running east and west, and the final street on the north is, or 81st and a half, excuse me, and 81st is the final street there, and then Highway 5. If that clears
Can
that
you,
up.
excuse me, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
The mic is not working.
Oh,
They need to adjust the mic.
Here you go. Works better if it's plugged in. Go ahead, sorry.
So as I was saying, cars come down that hill on 11 going northbound. They cut up at 81st, which is the T right there, where the mouse is. And then they continue north up to 5. That intersection right there, if you move your mouse down to the correct, there's no stop sign nor a yield at any one of those, from any 3 of those directions. So I've talked to all of the neighbors, specifically on that corner, all of whom are not opposed to either a 3-way stop or at the very least a yield sign. I think another thing that could potentially help this, 82nd Street, 82nd Street on Lions Park right there is not designed as a thoroughfare for anybody. You know, people aren't supposed. No one drives down that road unless they're going to or from their home or to the park, and so nobody needs to be going 30 miles an hour there. So another thing that I and my neighbors have considered or thought up is to also put a 3-way stop there. I know possibly this isn't the final solution. I think it ultimately has to be resolved at that intersection. As to what the final solution is, I'm not sure. I'm just here as a spokesperson for Quamaqlet Street, asking that we do something to make that street safer.
Thank you. This wasn't on the agenda tonight, but
Yes,
unless the council objects, I'd like to ask you to coordinate with Doug and the city engineer
Absolutely.
to look at this, and once the staff has had a chance to review it, come back to the council with some sort of a recommendation.
Absolutely.
So, council, any objections to that approach?
No.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Give me a call.
Next, Chris Lovering. Chris, please name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Chris Lovering from 7100 Rolling Acres Road. If you recall, I stood before the council about 11 months ago to talk about the Mount Olivet development project. And at that time, we were talking about the fence between the property at Mount Olivet and our property at Rolling Acres Road. And it was determined that they were going to honor the 2014 conditional use permit requirements that indicated that they were going to replace the fence that was there, the existing fence that is a chain link fence with an opaque fence, since they're removing the residence that was there and building a large parking lot with lights and noise and sound. So they went through this process. They built the parking lot. I was corresponding with Ben because there's no fence going up, as per was agreed to at the council meeting, with the resolution in the council meeting, and through correspondence with Mount Olivet. Ben never responded at the time. I've had a very different experience with Ryan and Laura. So Ryan and Laura, thank you for being responsive in this. But still, there's been no resolution. So they have indicated, I've been told that they've indicated they're done building a fence. They put a very small section of fence behind the existing chain link fence, but they did not follow what the terms of the agreement of the 2014 conditional use permit that they agreed to, that they were going to replace the existing chain link fence on the north side with an opaque 6-foot fence.
If I remember right, when that came before the council, I asked the gentleman that spoke whether he could commit Mount Olivet, and I
Correct.
believe he did say that they would honor that 2014 agreement.
Absolutely did.
Is this something we
Mr.
need?
Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
We are aware of the situation. We've researched it, and we are working with the church to get them to build a fence, exactly as he said.
So is my recollection correct? They did commit to do it?
He is correct, and we are in agreement with him.
All right. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Staff is on it. Were there other comments that you had?
No, that was it. Next time I will listen to Councilmember Gregory, because at the time he said we need to have some detail around this in terms of timing and other things, and that was dismissed by the developer at the time. So, sorry, Mr. Gregg, you're absolutely right.
Did the detail get into the city's documentation?
I don't think the resolution was ever done physically on paper. It was done on video where this group agreed to the resolution, but I don't think it was documented, or at least Ryan and Laura had difficulty in finding anything.
Mr. Mayor, so we have, since we last spoke, tracked down the signed copy of that resolution. That is resolution number 1751. And the City Council had added a fifth condition of approval to that resolution, which spoke to this fence agreement. And that the previous version that I had seen had been a draft of that resolution, which is why the confusion had resulted. We have passed that information on to the representatives at Mount Olivet, and we're going to be contacting the Loverings and their representation with that shortly.
So you never found the final resolution with the fifth element?
Yes, we found a copy of that PDF, so we have
Okay.
an electronic copy of it.
With the fifth element
Yes, with the condition added.
that was signed?
And it's signed, yes. So it, that was all that we needed to move forward with that, and apologize about the confusion.
Is it sufficiently detailed that everybody can agree what the end result should be? And
The language of the resolution, I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but essentially says that the existing chain link fence on the northern part of the property would need to be replaced with a 6-foot opaque fence for privacy. In my reading of that, that would mean the entirety of what exists on the site plan. And with that assessment, looking at the site plan, the chain link fence seems to run most of the property, if not the entirety of the property. I have indicated to Mount Olivet's representation if they have other documentation that I'm just not finding within the city files due to organizational elements of some other agreed upon detail, that they need to show that to us. Otherwise, we would need that to be followed up on and completed before we consider their the building permit to be in compliance with their site plan, which is what we would require for their certificate of occupancy.
Thank you. Council, any other comments? All right, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Those are the only two slips I have. Is there anybody else that would like to address the council? Okay, that closes the open forum. Next, the consent agenda. Does anybody, council, staff, or in the public want to remove anything from the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead.
I'd like to remove item B, claims roster, and item G, downtown parking study, from the consent agenda.
B and G?
B, claims roster.
B as in boy and G. Okay, any other items?
I was going to request item G also.
Okay, anything else? Public?
Why G?
It doesn't matter. Anybody can remove anything from the consent agenda for any
We're
reason.
going to discuss it separately.
Once if there's no other items to be removed, the way the process works is as soon as we pass the rest of the consent agenda, an item removed will immediately be discussed by the council. So with that, can I have I move that we approve the consent agenda minus items B and G. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The consent agenda is passed. The first item we will take up is item B. Councilmember Gregory, you had this pulled off. Claims roster, go ahead.
Sure, I guess specifically claims roster 529. We've got two of them on there. 529 claims roster. If we could pull it up and just pull up the title page, that's all I'm looking at. Toward the bottom on the title page, it reads, the claims roster reflects both proposed expenditures to be authorized by the City Council as well as expenditures authorized by the City Manager. The City Council exercises an oversight or audit role regarding expenditures made by the City Manager. I'm not sure where that language originated from. I tried to do a little research. I looked on the League of City website, and I looked on state statute website, and I couldn't find it there. What I did find on state statute reads something quite different. On state statute website, it says, all claims shall be audited and approved by City Council. The only time we ever had an up or down vote on legal fees was February of last year. It was an up or down vote. It was tied 1-1. That motion failed. We have not had a single vote since then. The very next month, this language appeared on the claims roster. It hadn't been there before, but in March of 2017, that's when the first time this language appeared on that claims roster. State statute seems pretty clear. It's pretty unambiguous. All claims shall be audited and approved by City Council. The only way we can approve of something, to my knowledge, is if we vote on it. The city manager has stated once again that he's going to pay legal fees today. We're not going to vote on it. We're not going to approve it. Just like we haven't approved any legal fees, both last year or this year. One thing I have learned over these past couple of years, looking at all of these legal fee issues, I've watched court proceedings. I've read dozens of letters between lawyers, read countless legal documents. One thing I have learned by doing all that is words matter. Words have meaning. And the words that in state statute are very different than what we have here on our claims roster. All claims shall be audited and approved by City Council. That has meaning, and that's very different than we simply have oversight. Now, I'm not aware of any effort by staff to try to come to any kind of a compromise on cost sharing of these legal fees between the defendants and City Council. But I am surprised by how far city staff is willing to extend themselves to make sure that all of these fees get paid by the taxpayers of Victoria.
So I thank you. This would make the third time now that changes have been made to these agenda templates. Both the time frame is when Ms. Hokkanen was the city manager. Bob, do you recall this? Do you know anything about this and why this was changed in, what was it, March of 17? Councilmember Gregory?
Yes,
March 17.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I think I remember talking to Lori about the language that Councilmember you're referring to. I guess I don't know that I recall sort of the rationale for adding the language other than to express her understanding of her authority, that as city manager she had certain expenditure authority, and when she had the authority to make an expenditure that you had to exercise an audit or an oversight role. I guess, Councilmember, if your point is that this language does not mirror state law in the sense that it uses the word oversight instead of audit, I guess I don't know that I see a legal distinction there. I see no reason why that language couldn't be modified, or frankly, I mean, it's up to the council. If you don't want that language on there at all, I think that's up to you ultimately. So, but no is the answer to your question, Mayor. I don't recall sort of a rationale for it, but I do recall it being added. I do remember talking.
Wouldn't that,
I think your time frame is about right.
wouldn't that be at least the council made aware of that kind of change being made? I don't recall any of this.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I can't speak to the mechanics of, I don't recall how it was added or who decided to add it and whether it was brought to the council's attention at that time or not. I don't recall as I sit here now. So, but fair point.
Is this language illegal or inaccurate?
Well, so Mayor and Council know, of course, a language on the invoice or the claims roster that comes before you. I mean, it's not ultimately this is expressing, I guess, the staff's understanding of the law. It's not legally binding, nor is it legally problematic. I mean, more broadly, the issue that's being raised, which has been obviously raised before, this issue of whether city managers in cities that have the manager form of government, whether the manager has any independent authority to hire and fire, independent authority to spend money, that is something that has come up with this council a number of times, and that might warrant discussion for the council to discuss what authorities city managers have in that form of government and what is the scope of that authority, et cetera. I'm not prepared, obviously, to sit here and discuss and debate it tonight, but to your question, council member, no, it's, again, I think it's an accurate statement of the law. City managers in city manager forms of government do have independent expenditure authority that can be limited by the council. And when the manager exercises that authority, as the council member Gregory correctly points out, the council has to exercise an audit role, an oversight role, as it's stated here. So I guess in my view, I think that's an accurate statement of law, but ultimately it's your decision what you want in your claims roster, not mine.
An audit role, just without sitting here with a dictionary, an audit role means you're reviewing for propriety. It doesn't mean you're going to change anything.
Well, so Mayor and Council, my view of using the word oversight or audit, which I think in this context are essentially interchangeable, the point there is that the council isn't authorizing, isn't pre-authorizing the expenditure. The council is after the fact overseeing it or auditing it. And so to your point, yes, there is a distinction between pre-approving or authorizing an expenditure and after the fact seeing it and debating it and discussing it and giving some direction on a go-forward basis after the fact. You have auditors that come here and check your books and records at the end of every year. They have no authority to change what's already happened, obviously. But they audit your books and they give you direction for the next year to change your practices if you need to. And in the case of Victoria, they have not seen fit to do that much or at all. But that's the role of an auditor, is to come in after the fact and say you're doing it right or you're not doing it right.
Council, other comments?
Maybe this is beating a dead horse, but what do you do with the word shall be approved by city council?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, again, I believe the language accurately reflects the law. I've given you a legal memo about this issue.
Okay.
I don't know how to go further down the road. Ultimately, council member, if the item before you tonight is this claims roster and all future claims rosters, I don't know, Mayor, if that's your view of what's before you, but if that's what's before you, it's up to you what you put on your claims roster. It's not up to me or the staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Hearing no other comments, let's move to item G. Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, the reason I pulled this,
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
He pulled that. That hasn't been approved yet.
oh, I'm sorry.
Correct. He pulled it so that we can discuss it and
Right.
decide whether or not we're going to approve it.
Need a motion.
I was going to do them both at once, but all right, we can go do B first. I move that we approve item B. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Consent item 4B is approved. Now we'll move to item G. Go ahead,
Very
Councilmember
good.
Grady.
Okay, this is a fairly lengthy study, staff report, whatever you want to call it, but I was kind of surprised by the scope of this parking study. The only people that are going to have input under this plan are people from the business community. There will be no input from the residents, from the 9,000 residents of this community have no input into this plan whatsoever. I don't really care for that idea. The downtown parking is a very important issue for this community, and a lot of people have expressed a great deal of interest in it. I think the residential community, their taxpayers, need to have some representation in this group. We have a project management team, which under this plan only consists of staff. I would like to propose adding the mayor to that project management team, along with one other council member of the council's choosing. And I would like to see all of these project management team meetings posted and open to the public, as well as the stakeholder meetings. The stakeholders is the business community. I would like to see those posted and open to the public. I would also like to see a component added to this process that looks at how are we going to pay for this. I've talked about and privately with members of the VBA about the possibility of adding some kind of a special assessment to landowners in downtown. And we've also have discussed both here in council and privately about possibility of a food and beverage tax. I'd like to see some data collected as to how much revenue those two items could possibly generate. But most definitely, this process needs to be open and transparent.
I'd like to add that the part that Councilmember Gregory is referring to is in the parking study scope of work document. It talks about a work group that's formed with downtown property owners, business developers, downtown property owners, business owners, and staff. But there's no mention of residents in the community participating in that. And I think residents have to participate, especially some of these parking things that, if it had been discussed, could cost the taxpayers a few $1 million. They need to have representation on this. Council, other comments?
Yes, I agree. Having citizens participate. My only question is around the order or the priority of the items that you suggested, Councilmember Gregory, to be added. And if we're talking about how are we going to pay for this, is there going to be a tax? My understanding of a study is to determine a need, not present a solution, that would be kind of a phase 2 type thing. Let's determine the need first and then figure out what the solution is, that those would come as a part of solutioning. And I don't think we're paying someone here to give us a solution unless I'm misreading that.
I agree with Councilor Crowley. This is a analytical tool to decide how much parking Victoria needs, and it's done in a very rigorous manner. Once it's decided how much parking Victoria needs to flourish, then there has to be a whole different initiative that says, what are we going to do and how are we going to pay for it? To put everything in one bundle, we're going to be studying for 3 years. So I would just like to hear the raw numbers and say, we had somebody independent look at this, and this is what they're telling us, that we had a major problem or we have a problem that we could work around. Give us some orders of magnitude, some specifics that are objective. So I took it that this is the purpose of the report. Once we have that information, we study it and we start to say, what should we do and how are we going to do it and how much is it going to cost and who's going to pay for it? That's another entire initiative. Just my opinion.
Thank you. I agree that we need an independent assessment that does include the residents. One of the things that I was told is the consultant that we're looking at for this in a comprehensive planning steering committee mentioned that, you're going to have to build a parking garage. So it seems to me that the consultant has already determined what the outcome is going to be.
And maybe we need a different consultant.
That's exactly what I was going to propose. I'd like to see residents picked that would sit on this steering committee and meet with the staff and the others as a stakeholder. And then we use a consultant that is completely new to the city, completely new to the problem, to take a totally independent look. And once they've done that, then I believe once they've gone through that process, maybe the next step to some of the other council members' comments is we could then have a council workshop to review that report and focus specifically on the recommendations that come out of that and the associated questions related to cost and location.
I don't disagree with any of that. I am a little bit reluctant to act on hearsay, though. Do we know for sure that statement that there's going to be a parking garage, do we know that was made, that statement was made by the consultant? Do we have it in a report or something that we can verify that?
That's a valid question. I wasn't at the comprehensive steering committee, but others that were at there and heard it firsthand told me that. Is anybody here from the comp plan steering committee that could comment?
We discussed
John, for the record, name and address.
John Hayes, and I live at 8835 County Road 43.
Thank you.
And my recollection is that we were reviewing a draft document, and there was some discussion about creating additional parking, requiring additional parking, and what we as a steering committee recommended was not to specify the nature of what that parking solution would look like, but to recognize that there would need to be a solution of some type. And I think that's what the consultant probably edited his report to show.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
John Lickman, I was at the same council meeting with Mr. Hayes and to completely concur with what he just stated. So came up in discussion, but nobody stated we had to have X, but it was discussed that we should probably research it.
Okay.
So no, you were at the meeting, and no one said we need to build a parking ramp.
There's a lot of things said, a lot of things discussed.
But I mean,
By the consultant.
by the consultant. The consultant did not.
Not that I recall. There's a lot of open discussion with the group. I think there's what.
Right,
12
but the
or 14
consultant
of us.
didn't say we.
He may have been interacting with all of us, but nothing specifically stating that I remember.
Do you recall the statement, "We need to go vertical"?
Not that specifically.
Okay.
So I think this is kind of humorous that this is coming up right now, and I'm glad to have two people here that were at the meeting, because I personally, I think I've counted 5 different things that people said I've said I wanted in downtown Victoria for parking, and I haven't said a thing other than I prefer not to build a parking garage. And so the one thing that I think we need to focus on is what are the facts, and not keep stirring up hearsay. And so thank you.
I completely concur.
If I could, John, just one quick question. Do you know or do you recall that conversation with respect to parking? Was there any sort of boundaries? I'm trying not to lead the conversation, but was it specific to Core or overall or Steger Lake? Or, I mean, was there any boundaries around it?
There's been a lot of discussion about it because we do have issues. We've talked about the extension down Steger. We talked about the potential of putting a ramp in here. We talked about the swapping or transitional property with Gannon. We talked about additional parking to the west, but it wasn't our job to decide what the city is going to do, but discuss what the city might do as we put the comp plan together.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right,
Mayor?
go ahead.
On the study plan on page 4 of 5, Councilmember Crowley and Councilmember Vogt said that we weren't looking at funding mechanisms. Last sentence under operation and management, it says this task will identify appropriate owners and operators, financial obligations, and funding mechanisms for managing the downtown parking supply. So this plan does call for looking at funding supply.
I just want to clarify that staff is only seeking authorization for task 2, 3, and part of task 4, so just the data gathering phases, because the consultant was recommending that you had to do that work before you could initiate the additional phases, because we need to know what the actual needs are before they can really scope what those future phases. But we wanted them to at least provide a scope of work that we could see what it might be the order of cost to do the whole thing. So there's a fee estimate that shows the overall study being about $13,320, but the part that we're seeking authorization for tonight is $6,600. So just for tasks 2, 3, 4.1, and 4.2.
And my interpretation of that language, Mr. Gregory, is not that we're going to figure out a parking garage has been brought up. We're not going to figure out as a part of this study how to pay for a parking garage. My interpretation of that was that we were going to look at the current policy and how parking is compensated or paid for by the businesses, and there might be alternatives that would do a better job, and that we would be looking at that as opposed to a capital expenditure.
I have a further comment. The reason I requested, or I would have requested that this be pulled from the consent agenda was task number 4, exploration, and task number 4.1, utilization counts. And the recommendation is that the consultant will perform a one-day field visit to determine utilization rates for on-street and off-street parking spaces within the study area. What I have trouble understanding is this guy's going to come here for 1 day and is going to come up with rates that we're supposed to hang our hat on.
So is he going to
this
come
is
here
totally,
come here for the park or for the car show?
This is a totally absurd statement. So whatever we get here, whoever's coming here has got to come here for more than 1 day and has got to be looking at this for more than 3 different intervals.
That's a good point.
So we need to get this
All right, let me get
rewritten.
Let me get last comment. Go ahead.
My name is Beth Canarde. I own the Parlor Salon and Spa. This might give you a good idea, but how many of you are business owners here that have shown up? How many of you have had issues with parking? Everybody has. And we're all on the west side. So I feel like our concerns aren't being met. And I feel like we're bringing business to Victoria. That's all we want to do. But I feel like our needs are not being heard. So I don't know what the solution is, but I feel like it's been an issue for all of us, and the majority of my clients are from Victoria. So I also feel like if you're going to have an independent counsel for residents, I would hope that they are also people who frequent our businesses and not people who go east.
Okay, thank you. At this point, unless there's further comments, I move that we add. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I move that we add at least 2 Victoria homeowners to the working group to meet with the business owners, the property owners, and the staff. Is there a second to that motion?
Are you going to modify it further, or is that?
Discussion.
I was going to do 2 separate motions, but the second motion I wanted to make was that we just, for the sake of to make sure that there's no questions, that we just get a completely independent consultant to come in and do the parking study. Right? I also agree with Councilmember Vogt. Coming out here for 1 day is not enough to because you get that's a sample size of 1. That's not big enough. We need a broader sample size across a longer period of time. I don't want to study this to death, but we need a broader sample to know if we're going to do a parking study and do an analysis, it's got to look at a greater time frame than just a single day. So I wanted to make both of those motions. So at this point, I move that we do those 2 things: a new, totally independent consultant, and secondly, we appoint 2, or we find 2 Victoria residents to be members of that steering group with the staff. Is there a second to that motion?
When we say, Mr. Mayor, residents, are we talking about the business owners or?
Somebody that's not a property owner, a downtown property owner, or downtown business owner. Somebody that's outside of that. So that group is also represented as far as these discussions.
So are we discussing this right now, or are we in the middle of a motion and I'm going to come back and discuss it?
I will second for the point of discussion.
There. Now we can have the discussion on the motion. Go ahead.
Thank you. My only concern with your amendments, I agree in spirit, but I don't want to limit or direct staff to pick any one individual consultant. And this consultant may be fine. There was a concern that's raised. To me, it sounds like hearsay. I would give direction to staff to say pick the right consultant that is independent, and if it's this one, that's fine.
I would echo that comment. Also in spirit that getting some citizen representation and sorry, I've forgotten your name, but specifically persons who are patronizing the businesses.
Beth, yeah.
Beth, thank you. Sorry, but not just random people, but people who are regular patrons of downtown and can speak firsthand to their experience. I also wouldn't necessarily discard any particular consultant. Again, if the hearsay is just that and it's inaccurate, we have a bit of a history with HKGI. They know us pretty well, which may be part of the reason why they're thinking they can do it in a very abbreviated way. I too think that just 1 day with a couple of small sessions is probably inadequate. But I would like to give the staff a chance to work with them to kind of clarify and refine this proposal, noting the council's concerns. And then if they don't feel that they can get a good independent review, then seek additional choices. But we've worked with these guys and they know us pretty well, so that can help both in speed and in cost.
Doug, quick question. Are the comprehensive steering committees, are they recorded?
I don't know. Sure.
They have audio recording.
They do have audio recordings? All right. We'll take that as a to-do to find out, but I don't want to prolong this thing either. So I'm fine. I'll remove the motion about, go ahead.
I would like to take a poll. Is there objections to posting these meetings and having them open to the public?
No objection from me.
None from me.
Only to the extent, no objection, but only to the extent that it does not hinder their progress.
All right. We don't want a meeting of 50 people, but the people can come in. So hearing that there seems to be a majority on the council for this, Doug, can we hold these meetings and announce them on the city website or some other means? Find the citizen representatives to participate in the working group, but hold the meetings here, and then other members of the public, if they wish, can come and just watch the meetings?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know why that wouldn't work. I don't have a problem.
Okay, council, any objections to that?
I think the operative word would be watch. So there wouldn't be you can't just walk in and participate.
Agreed. If we have 3 business owners, then we should probably have 3 residents, right, that participate and use the downtown, just to have it balanced and fair. And I think we can defer that to the staff. I don't think I can come in as a member of the public and watch it myself. I don't think we need council members there. Councilmember Gregory, are you okay with that?
That sounds good.
Okay. So
Getting to the consultant, Mr. Mayor, final comment. Getting to which consultant we should choose. I think HKGI is reputable, but I'm not a mathematician. My statistics course was in 1967 in college. But listen, I would think you could easily get a low-paid person who knew what you wanted and could go through these parking lots every day for 3 weeks or 2 weeks and come up with some statistics that are better than one day. And I don't. That's common sense. So I don't know what statistical model this guy is using, but you cannot come here and take a snapshot for one day and build a study that you're going to sell to the city of Victoria.
So at this point, I'm going to withdraw both my motions. I'm going to submit a new motion now that staff has members of the steering committee that if they have 3 business owners, they have 3 residents, so it's balanced, and they're added to the steering group. And secondly, the meetings are announced. Doug can figure out the mechanics and the details. The meetings are announced and then held in the council chamber, so members of the public can come and watch the meetings, but not necessarily participate. The people that are assigned are participating. Is there a second to that motion?
Second the motion.
Any further discussion on that? Hearing now, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So we'll make that one change. As far as the consultant itself, it seems like the majority on the council wants to continue down the path with HKGI. HKGI. So I move that we have staff look to determine if, in fact, HKGI is the appropriate consultant, and if so, that they adjust that scope part such that we have a sample size that is more representative for dates and timeframes.
Statistically significant.
Correct. Statistically significant, and will allow Kara to work that out with the consultant. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, so we've got that adjustment. Kara, is that clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor,
go ahead.
I have a question just about, and maybe Kara and Doug will get this, and I'm the one that doesn't get it, but to the extent the scope has been changed to have more study time, to the extent that changes the quoted price, have you just authorized that, council, or does staff need to come back with a new price if that changes the price?
I would like to, so let's add one other motion. To answer that question, let's authorize another, what would you, 4,000 is enough?
That's what if we can refine the scope and remain under 10,000, then that
You don't
would
need
be
council approval for
consistent
that,
with
right?
Doug being able to approve that amount under 10,000. Then we wouldn't bring it back. If we find that adding, I think what we'll probably do is call it a task force, I think is the word I'm hearing for what we would call this group of people to work on it. And then once we figure out what that might add and the statistically significant information, if we're under, then
All right, so if you would verify the numbers, and if it's less than 10,000, Doug can approve it, doesn't have to come back to the council. If it's over that for some reason, you'll bring it back to the council? Council, any comments? Is that okay?
Sounds good.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, we'll tell you what it will cost.
Okay.
There you go.
We don't have to delay, though, if it's under that amount, right?
I'll just tell you what it is so you know.
Got it. All right. Any other questions? All right, that item is completed. Next
Do
item.
we officially then table this because it was part of the consent agenda? We pulled it, we talked it through. Do we table it until we have that feedback? Or
That's
the appropriate action to take?
That's probably
We just voted on it. There's
right
nothing
to make
table.
the change and let it go.
Yeah.
So
So they're going to go do the project.
the only way it comes back is if the amount is over the $10,000 limit.
Yeah.
All right. Next item.
So that second motion for authorizing additional 4,000, was that a motion?
No, that was not a motion. They're just going to look. Correct. And as long as the amount doesn't exceed the $10,000, he has authority already to sign it. Any other questions? Okay, that completes item G. Next item is donations. Can we get this up on the staff or on the screen, please? Thank you.
I move we approve donations from Excel Energy in the amount of $250 for concerts in the park. South Metro Federal Credit Union, $200 for T-ball and coach pitch. Man, I'm going to have to start wearing glasses. 1 Hour Cleaners Incorporated, $100 for movies in the park. Radiance Dental, $100 for T-ball and coach pitch. Ruby's Roost Bakery and Coffee, $150 for concerts in the park. Charter Bank, $250 for concerts in the park. Travel Design by Ann, $200 for concerts in the park and movies in the park. Anonymous, $1,000 for concerts in the park. Concept 3D, $650. Tree for Madison Park. Rhonda Bell for $100 for the fire department. Marsh Lake Hunting Preserve, $200 for the fire department, and we thank them very much for their generosity.
Yes. Motion is second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much for the donations. Next item, visitors presentation, State of the Library, Patrick Jones and Heidi Hoax. Did I say that right? Hawks. Sorry. Heidi, for the record, your name and your position.
Okay, my name is Heidi Hawks, and I'm the director of Carver County Libraries. And I just want to thank you all, Mr. Mayor, council people, staff, for allowing your branch manager and myself to come here and talk about the lovely Victoria Library that you have down below us. I love my job. It is the best job in the world because I get to work with the best people in the world throughout the county, through the cities, and particularly those individuals that come into our libraries who are looking for something to read, looking for a place to be, to sit. And in your library, it's a very busy library, nestled right in the middle of your downtown and right next to a beautiful lake. And, of course, the band shell. I love that band shell. It is an ideal spot, a picturesque spot. And we love this library. It is our technology library. People call here with all kinds of technology questions and get their answers, as well as come in with their children, their young children, and give them wonderful experiences in reading. Now, as a part of the Carver County Library System, you actually get more for your money than you would have had this been an independent library, because it's the economy of scale. We're able to buy more books because we can drive the price down when we purchase more. We're able to share our staffs and our staff expertise, so you don't have to keep purchasing different staffs' time for certain projects. We share it all within the county system. Carver County Library System is a full-service library system with 4 different places that hold express libraries, including Victoria at the recreational center. So you get a lot for your money. But besides that, to make sure you get the most for your money, we are a part of the MELSA regional library system. MELSA is one of the 12 regional library systems in the state. Because we are a part of that, we get reimbursements for our lines, for computers. We get a level playing field for e-resources. We also get monies for training our staff and so much more. Probably the biggest thing we get, though, is interlibrary loan services. So if you want something, a book, a DVD, an article, an obscure article, and it's only available in one place, let's say it's up in Ely, you can get it for free. And you can have it sent back for free. It's the best deal in town. So wonderful things as being a part of that. This last year, we started a strategic planning process where we put our framework out there, determined our framework for our strategic plan, and we followed the county's strategic plan framework, the pattern of communities, culture, connections, finances, and growth. It's the first time we've done that. And when we got to the portion where we had to talk about our values, our staff said, no, we're not going to talk about our values. Values are what we as staff consider important. We want to focus on the public. So we're going to promise them certain things that we're going to do for them. And you'll see in our annual report that you have before you, those promises are listed on the front cover. And if you look inside, you're going to see each promise with how we actually kept our promise to you by specific instances that happened within the library. Also some photographs there. So bottom line, what do all these promises kept mean? Look at the back. It means almost 1 million circulations last year. It means 505,807 people visited the libraries in Carver County. It means 189,822 people visited the library on its website, so what we call our Jammies patrons. It means a whole lot of different things. If you look down the entire listing, it's wonderful. But what are the stories behind those numbers? Well, let me tell you about a young teen who came from Somalia, had no knowledge of the English language, and he came into the library and he communicated with his hands, and he got started on our transparent languages database, and he started learning English. And then he started coming up and practicing his English on our staff. And you should see him today. He practices his English every week with staff, and he's thinking he might be able to get a job at McDonald's now. He's very excited. And he told us this with the biggest smile on his face. Or the woman who had gotten to a certain time in her life who really couldn't live alone anymore. And she went into a nursing home. She was having a tough time of it. She didn't want to be there, so of course she became very ill and very weak and just sat. Whether she sat on her bed or sat in her wheelchair, she just sat. Well, we were asked to bring in a homebound volunteer, so we did, to ask her what she'd like to see. Was there a certain kind of author she liked to read? Well, she didn't want to read anything, but she liked music, and she liked country western music. Did we have any of that? Well, yes, we did. Yeah. So we brought in some tapes for her, some CDs, I should say, And she listened, and suddenly she was moving in her bed, and then she was moving in her wheelchair, and pretty soon she got up in her walker, and she was moving all around. She was dancing. And she told the homebound volunteer not only was she feeling stronger, but she had lost 5 pounds. You know, I could go on and on with stories, but I think one of the best stories for you tonight will be the story of a young Victoria student. And for that, I'm going to bring up your branch manager, Patrick Jones, to talk to you about that and about things that have been happening in the Victoria Library.
Thank you.
Hi, Patrick Jones, branch manager for the Victoria and Chanhassen Library. Every year, they hold a History Day, and many of you might be familiar with History Day. And we had a young patron here, Ellie, who used us extensively, both library materials that we owned here at Chanhassen, as well as interlibrary loan. And we're happy to report that we believe through our hard work and her harder work that she won an honorable mention at this year's History Day celebration. So what is it we do? We circulate a lot of books to kids. We circulate 39,000 books to kids, almost 40,000, opposed to 13,000 to adults. We're a very kid-friendly branch. We're also a branch that's very friendly to technology. We did a scavenger hunt with some of the things with our 3D printer. We're a branch that does try to attract adults, and one of the things is our Lucky Day collection, and here you see a picture of the Lucky Day collection, which is supported by the Friends of the Library. As Heidi mentioned, we use the outside a lot. During June, we did story times outside. Then back inside in July and August, we actually did a program in conjunction with Volksfest. In September and October, we had someone from the Minnesota Opera come out. I will not repeat any of the songs that she sang because I want to spare you of that. But we have lots of, in the fall, story times. And November and December are full of story times and crafts. What we do at the Victoria Library is simply try to make as many ways that we can engage with our community as possible. And I thank you for your time.
You guys do really good work.
Thank you. Do you have any questions of us?
Council?
I was curious if you could speak a little bit to kind of the trend over time. Are the books circulated, et cetera, are those increasing? Are visits increasing? Are they pretty stable?
Okay. The Victoria Library opened in 2015, and a new broom sweeps clean. So, of course, we always expect that you're going to have a huge surge in circulation that first year. So 2015 into 2016, because it wasn't a full year. So 2016 into 2017, we did see a drop. We did not see a drop, however, it was mostly in adult. We did not see a drop, however, in children's materials. Those are very, very strong. And this last year, I think it's stabilized. Yeah. So that's a really good thing when you look across the country. Circulation is going down. People are still using the library and using it just as much, if not more, but they're using it to go to programs. They're using it as a gathering space. This is all across the U.S. Because the economy is better. So they're going out and they're buying books. They're going to the movies, buying movies for at home. They don't necessarily check out, but they come to the library.
Thank you. And I say that with the backdrop of you guys are always putting together lots of great programming for all different age groups. And I know when we were originally considering whether to add a library to Victoria, it was, I think, the young families who were most eager to see something that they could do with their children outside the home that was not screen oriented, right? It was a little more educational, and so it's great to hear that has been a success in that respect. So thank you for the good work.
Thank you.
Council, any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a visitor presentation, absentee voting, Carver County, David Frischman. David, please, for the record, name and position.
David Frischman. I'm the Director of Property and Financial Services for Carver County. I didn't realize it was Carver County night at Victoria City Council. Heidi and I didn't coordinate that, but worked out well. So tonight my topic is absentee voting. In addition to being the finance director, I've been that for 10 years. I've also taken on last 2 years the assessing department, land records, as well as property tax, elections, and the license center. So those 3 departments, in addition to being my finance background. So I'd like to start out my presentation by thanking Doug and Cindy for working with me on this proposal. The absentee voting has had bipartisan support at the legislature. It's become increasingly popular among Minnesota voters. The increasing popularity is what's driving Carver County staff, or election staff, to create this PowerPoint. I guess I'm in charge of that. Is that? Do I move that? So absentee voting, let me start with just a quick definition of that. That's when you vote before Election Day. And when you vote on Election Day, that's a partnership between the city and the county. And the cities manage the election process on Election Day through your precincts, and then the county just summarizes those and sends it to the state. Absentee voting in Carver County has been just 100% done by the county. That's the process that we're talking about changing. So the drive and the interest in absentee voting really started in 2014. Prior to that, you had to have an excuse why you did absentee voting here in Minnesota. You're going to be out of town, you had surgery, you knew you were going to be sick that day, so you had an excuse. In 2014, you no longer had to have an excuse. You could just say, I want to vote absentee, and you're able to do that. So we started to see a little bit of an increase in absentee voting at that point. The last election, 2016, they streamlined the process, which is pretty a paper-intensive process, absentee voting, but they streamlined it so in the last 7 days before the election, you can actually take your ballot, even though you're voting absentee, and put it directly into the counter. That seemed to trigger a lot more interest in people doing that process. As I mentioned, it was bipartisan support. So in 2016, the bottom line was 21% of our voters in Carver County voted by absentee. We expect that the number to increase in 2018. We're not sure how much. But I have a couple of charts here to just kind of summarize those numbers. Actually, I got to read. So the 21% in 2016, you can see the spike. Prior to that, it had been bouncing around depending on whether it was a presidential election or non-presidential. We had some things, but overall you could see it was pretty flat. But then you can see in 2016, in 2014, we should have seen a drop. But actually it stayed flat. So to us, that was an increase. And then in 2016, obviously, it went straight up. Same thing with the overall number of voters. You can see the bouncing until 2016, and then we're up around 12,000 absentee voters in Carver County. And as I mentioned, the process we had set up in the process, all 12,000 of those votes were all managed by the county, unlike Election Day, where it's a partnership between the city and the county. We looked at what other counties are doing, and you can see that the county only, this is for 2016, the county only, it was Carver, Scott, and Washington. You can see most of the other metro counties delegated the absentee voting process to the cities. So it was either a combination of all cities, like in Hennepin, or limited to larger cities, or whichever ones wanted to do it. So in 2018, we're moving towards the delegating to the city. We can't force anybody to do it. It's simply a matter of if it's something you guys, a service you want to provide to your residents, we'll work with you to make that happen. Similar to what we do on Election Day, where we work together, what we're talking about changing is the absentee voting process. I've talked with the city of Waconia. They're interested in doing it. So tonight I'm here to answer any questions and to make a presentation to the city, to the Victoria City Council, to see if you're interested in heading down that path. To look at some of your numbers, specifically, you can see the chart. This is all absentee. This is mail and in person, and you can see the different colors with red being the mail and blue is the in person. If you were to accept the delegation to do absentee ballots at Victoria, it would be the blue on the chart. For your city, that would be the number, at least for 2016, a number of voters that you'd have to be looking at processing. You can see that the Chanhassen and Chaska kind of dominated the charts, and then Victoria, Waconia, they're really the next group in terms of the absentee ballot process. feel free to stop me if you have any questions along the way. It's kind of
To me, this all comes down to cost. How would
I'm
this
getting to
work?
that. Yep,
Okay, so I'll
exactly.
wait
Yep.
until you get there.
Okay. So in-person absentee, the way we did it in 2016, we had a countywide precinct at the Government Center in Chaska, as well as the Chan License Center. Overall, the summary, it did not work well for anybody. We didn't anticipate that 21% spike. It ended up being a very crowded, poor traffic patterns. It was inconvenient for our regular customers. And as well as the process when we're doing a countywide, when we have all 34 precincts in the county, all at the counter there. So when people can come up from anywhere throughout the county, they can ask for any one of 34 different ballots, which, as you might imagine, that gets to be a pretty inefficient process, pretty slow process. So for 2018, the staff has recommended to the county board that we continue to do the all mail. All the mail process, all the mail absentees throughout the county. We have a pretty good process for that keep that centralized. We're also, the other recommendation, we're going to move up to our second floor at Township Hall. We did on the first floor, right, with all of our other business, and we get in our counters, and man, that was really tough. But by moving up to the second floor, it's actually a separate room. We got wide hallways. We got we can take advantage of the parking that we have. That's pretty good. But we think we can separate out the traffic patterns between the voters and our regular customers. So we think that's going to be a lot better process. The Chan License Center, we recommend that we don't use that for an absentee voting process. You may have heard the MNLARS state software rollout, which was a huge mess and still is a huge mess. That we're still dealing with in our license centers, as well as Real ID, a federal statute, the enhanced ID process is coming October 1st. Same group of Minnesota IT people are going to help us out with that project. That helped us out with the MNLARS project, which wasn't a lot of help. So we're anticipating continued problems. We're still dealing with the MNLARS rollout. Now we're going to have another one coming in October. So the last thing we want to do is introduce even more people to that area. So we recommend we don't have a countywide precinct in Chan. We'll just have the one in Chaska. So any resident from throughout the county can come down to the city hall, or down to our township hall, go up on the second floor, and we'll take care of them there. And then as well, we recommended to the board that we encourage our 4 highest volume cities, if you remember that chart, Chan, Chaska, Victoria, and Waconia, to create an absentee city precincts. And if we could get all 4 of those, that's 93% of our absentee voters in mail. So that's why we focused in on those 4.
If we were to create one, not saying that we will, but if we were to create one, could anybody come here to vote?
No.
Or just Victoria?
Just Victoria.
Okay, thanks.
And it's a great, thank you for the segue. That's why we recommended, one of the reasons why we recommended this model. It's been in Hennepin County for over 30 years. Previously, I was the finance director and director of administration at Wayzata before Doug got there and came through there. And we were doing absentee ballots back in 1985 when I got there. So it's a proven model. It's been around for a long time. It's clearly in the statute. It just hasn't been a model that Carver County's used, but it's definitely been out there for a long time. To your point, Mayor, it is more efficient. You limit the ballots to just the city precincts in your city. So Waconia, they would have just their 2. You guys would have 3. Online. So when you're coming in, you're just dealing with your own residents, and you're only dealing with your own ballots. You're not the countywide one where we got 34, and we got to go through that whole process. So that's one of the key advantages to a city precinct. We feel it's more convenient, obviously, by having multiple locations spread out throughout the county. It allows people to be able in Victoria not have to drive down to Chaska to vote. They can just do it. They could do it here.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What does that mean? Create an absentee precinct?
Well, it's just the process of allowing your voters to come in and vote here or wherever you want to do it. But it's actually the city running it, which is the same as you do on election day. You have your precincts, and those are election day precincts. You'd be creating a absentee voting precinct. So it's a lot. Actually, it's a lot of the same people, a lot of the same process. There's just a little more paperwork involved with the absentee, but it's kind of a formal process where you would designate that we are going to do that at the city, and we go through the state of Minnesota and through that process.
And within that absentee precinct, are the ballots still dispersed by precinct 1, 2, 3, geographically where the residents live?
Well, you're
I don't mean the location where they would vote, but I mean, are the ballots still counted by precinct in that way?
Oh, yes. The process is the same. It literally is just the same process we do at the county. We're dealing with all 34 precincts. You'd mirror that same model. You'd just be dealing with your 3 precincts, and at this point, one location for those 3 precincts, and then it would be your city staff along with your election workers or whoever that would then create that process. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So more convenient. Especially if the city hall is better designed for the higher volume. The bigger lobbies, the wider hallways, and if you're allowed to, if you can set it up so like we could do here is where it's separate traffic up to here, kind of like we're doing Township Hall, rather than doing it at regular counters, designate a different spot. That can work pretty well. And then keep in mind that anybody that votes absentee reduces the volume on election day. So the long lines you have for election day, by moving people to absentee, that's a huge advantage for you. In terms of precincts, not having to add precincts as fast, or just having the long lines, by moving people towards the absentee, which is why I think the bipartisan support of the legislature and the increasing interest by the residents, as they see it, by the voters, they see the advantages to it.
Is this something we could put in the rec center and not necessarily in City Hall?
You could, except not this year. This year, my understanding is the timing has already gone past. Or if you can use City Hall, the window's still open for City Hall. But if you want to use something other than City Hall, then we got to notify the state earlier in the process.
Got it.
So that's a question that's come up too. But that's my understanding. So it is something you can do at different places. You got to let the state know a little earlier than this.
Yep. Got it. Thanks.
So I took the recommendation for the 4 to set up the city precincts to the 4 highest volume cities, and talked to their administrators. In Chaska, they preferred to have just the 1 precinct in City of Chaska. The idea of having it at City Hall and having just the city one, and then a couple blocks away the county one for countywide one. Matt was concerned that would look like, well, why didn't we just duplicate it? Why did we set up 2 different ones? Why didn't we just combine them? Thought it might be a little confusing. That is this the city or is this the county? So he was not in favor of having a separate city precinct for absentee voting. In Chanhassen, they were open to the idea, but they didn't think they had a good location. I think they had 3 main concerns. First one was parking, the second one was parking, and the third one was parking. So that's their issue. They actually the rec center is something that they can look at, but they had some construction going on in their rec center, so they're actually looking at that might be for in the future rather than City Hall, possibly their community center might be an option for in the future. And when I came to both Victoria and Maconia, the concern was what you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, that the staffing costs, to be able to do this. And really the issue is the volumes, at least we've experienced and we believe the volumes are not that bad during both the primary or the general election until the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks is when the volume comes up. Prior to that, you guys have regular traffic at City Hall here. People paying their municipal or their utility bills or getting a dog license or whatever, and then they vote absentee. So it's steady, but it's not a lot. When it comes to those last 2 weeks, that's when you see the big curve. That's when we think you need additional staff. That's where your costs would come in, is those last 2 weeks. That's what I heard from both the administrators. So we went back to the county board and said, this is not something the cities are able to budget for. They're concerned about the increasing costs those last 2 weeks. So we proposed to the county board a 2018 pilot project where we would reimburse the cities up to $3,000 for any additional staffing costs for those last 2 weeks, which we calculated as 2 staff people, 40 hours a week for 2 weeks. So roughly $3,000, some miscellaneous costs. The idea is to not have an additional cost for the city, any city that was willing to do this for 2018. Beyond 2018, we go to the model of other counties where if it's a service you want to provide for your voters, it would be something you would budget for as part of your budget process. But recognize in 2018, there's not enough time for you guys to have done that. So the idea is that, and if it works well, it's a service you want to provide, then it'll be up to your choice in 2020 as well. But the offer to pay for that additional staffing is just for 2018 pilot project. So that's what the So that's my absentee voter pitch in terms of seeing if there's interest with the Victoria City Council about doing that. I do have one more slide in terms of the election equipment, replacing that, but I can either wait for that or we can do that now or at your pleasure.
Why don't you go ahead and finish up, and then we'll have.
Separate from the absentee city precincts, the election equipment update, the equipment we got was it's 12 years old. We bought it in 2006. We had a federal grant. If you remember the hanging chads issue, the feds came out with this money and replaced all the voting equipment across the country. We got in on that, but now it's 12 years later. It's time to replace the stuff. The useful life usually between 10 and 15 years. So we're in that sweet spot of being 12 years old. So we're thinking it's time to replace those. Unfortunately, there's no federal money available. There was a state grant which we were able to take advantage of, and so in addition to replacing all of our equipment that we bought in 2016, we're also buying 130 electronic poll books to replace the paper poll books that's been a staple of elections for many, many years. They've got electronic poll books now that streamline the whole process and are very easy to use. I used it last year or 2 years ago in Hennepin County where I voted. So it's a nice process. The total cost $640,000. 90% is going to be paid for by the county, 10% paid by the state grant. So nothing for no dollars, no percentage for either cities or townships. That's the finance director and me. I was able to make that a lot easier to just have the county pay for it rather than going to a whole bunch of cities and townships and saying, "Can you guys help us out with the cost?" So the board agreed with that. But there is ongoing maintenance costs. That we've had that in the past. We bought it or got it through the federal grant. But the maintenance costs, the costs that we incur from our vendor, based on the number of pieces of equipment, we just pass that on to the cities based on the equipment you have. So that cost for the new election equipment is very similar to what we've had in the past. The only change is these poll books, electronic poll books. There's a $125 annual cost for that. We're looking at 11 of those poll books for City of Victoria based on the number of your voters, number of your precincts. So it's an additional $1,300 for the maintenance on that equipment cost.
All right.
So that's my presentation.
All right. Thank you, David. Council, questions?
Has the increase in absentee voting also correlated into an increase in overall votes? And I don't mean necessarily absolute numbers because our population's been growing, but so as a percentage of registered voters. I mean, hopefully that's the outcome, right? If we get more people to the polling places.
I got asked that exact same question by somebody in county staff today, and I didn't have an answer for it. But that seems to be that's the reason. I mean, that's intuitively that is exactly what we're trying to do. Have we actually seen that? I'd have to talk to my staff about that and look at their numbers to see if we've actually had people that used to not want to vote on election day because the lines are too long and they couldn't find a parking spot, so they ended up not voting because they have this ability now to do absentee. Maybe we got those people, but I think that is the idea. But no, I don't have any particular stats on that.
And I'd be interested if you could maybe do some research and just shoot an email into the city manager.
Yeah, I think I'll find that. I think I'll share that with the county board as well as all the other cities. I do think that's a good question.
All right, thank you.
Doug, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The run period for this, if we said, yeah, we're interested, I have two questions about that.
Mm-hmm.
One is it possible, I mean, do we have to sign up to set up and run for the entire absentee period, or could we just relieve the load during that 2-week peak period at the end?
Yeah, Councilmember Mayor, that I asked that question because I saw where that could be, where we need the help is just those last 2 weeks, and the answer I got is no. You have to. The state law requires that if you're going to be absentee precinct, you got to do it for the whole time. That's just. I guess part of the way the state set it up. And probably, in the long run, it's probably a good idea because it reduces the voter confusion and stuff. But the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, I can understand that. And then the last question for me is, if we did this as a sort of a pilot in 2018, does that set a precedent and obligate us going forward?
No, absolutely not. I mean, among your voters, you'd have to answer them for yourselves, but not for the county. The county appreciates the help. We work well together on election day. We think this is a good model for absentee pre-election day. But to the extent, like Chanhassen, if it ends up causing problems with parking, or like us, where it worked one year, or we thought it might work in the Chan License Center, and then it didn't work, and we don't want to do it again, you guys would have the same opportunity. Like I said, it's not something we can force cities to do. We can create the opportunity, but the cities have to accept that delegation.
question on the security. I have no idea what security is required. Should we have a voting machine here for a length of time? And then secondly, it's a two. Doug, I'd also like your thought. Where would this thing sit? How would it, when we start thinking about, excuse me, the ergonomics and people coming in and out, where would this be? Where would the staff sit? And we can't lose a conference room to something like this. So I'd like to kind of hear both.
Yeah, I can talk on the security. That's a main concern of the county as well. My elections manager as well as the supervisor did tour both Victoria and Waconia to see your operations, to see your buildings, to talk about security. Have a first discussion on that. But yeah, we definitely would be working with you guys in terms of security. Most of the other places, or at least my understanding is you typically would do it for when it's a lower volume. It's just right at your city hall counter. And people would come in, take care of business. They could also just do absentee at the same time. And we're going to do the same. We have it set up during the slower periods. We're going to do it one way. And those last 2 weeks, we're moving people around behind the scenes. And while it's slower, they're going to be doing multiple things. They're going to do mail as well as in person. Once those last 2 weeks, we're going to separate out the mail and put that in a different spot. And then we're just going to have these people just do in person because I think the volume's going to go up. I would imagine you guys could do the same kind of thing. You set it up until the volume gets to be so much. Then you divert them to a place like this and just deal with the traffic. But obviously that'd be up for you guys to decide.
Mr. Mayor, all the cities in Hennepin County I've worked in have done this in City Hall. It's really works. We would just do it at the front counter with our normal people, and then we'd have a couple extra people in those last couple of weeks. The voting booth that people would use would probably be out here in the hallway, maybe a couple of them, and then the people at the counter could see what's going on, and they turn the ballot in. So I don't think we would have a problem if the traffic got too heavy. I assume we could do something in this room, which is not used during the daytime. So,
where did the additional people come from?
What he's suggesting is we bring on some part-time people. We'd probably use election judges that we've used in our pool that are familiar with it. Cindy, do you have any other thoughts on that?
The people you use on the election day, they know all the rules, they know the process, and you just be bringing them in, teach them the absentee process.
And pay them.
Doug, in your experience in the other cities, is this a convenience for the residents to have it here? And then specifically here in Victoria, is this something that you can manage from a process and are willing to do so, or is this too much?
I don't think it'd be a problem for us to do it, particularly this year, because you're not in presidential. We do have gubernatorial and Senate race, but I don't see a problem. I think this is a good year to start it if you're going to start it rather than the presidential. But you are taking on a cost that the county now bears, not so much for this year, but for the 2020 election, which is presidential. It would be a heavier volume, probably cost us more.
How much more?
And it's interesting that Chaska could get away with not paying anything for their election, and we're paying part of ours, just, I assume, because they're located in the right place, and the same with Chanhassen. So I don't know how the county rationalizes us paying the full cost of it and the other cities not. So perhaps the subsidy should go for more than 1 year.
I would suggest that you're right, Doug. In terms of we have the same thing with electronic poll books. We're rushing to get those in and purchase them and get them out because we want to do it in 2018 when we don't have the volumes of 2020. So what we learn in 18, we'll be that much more ready for 2020. In terms of the cost sharing, and I've made worse suggestions to the county board in the past. So we would work with you guys, going forward to see what makes sense. It's come up before about Chaska being able to, get by using the county stuff. They aren't providing the service to their residents. They will be getting in line with anybody else throughout the county who's coming in there, all 34 precincts. But there are advantages to being the county seat, and there are disadvantages. I would say this is probably one advantage for Chaska.
When would Victoria have to commit one way or the other?
I'm sure there's some kind of deadline out there. I know it's not imminent. I know we have some time, but I'd have to work with the city staff.
We
And
got an August election, right?
yeah, well, yeah, that would be before August. We have to notify the state at some point, and you know, I'm not operating on the impression that we have to have a formal resolution from you guys. We may need to come back on a consent item and say, yeah, you guys agree to that. We haven't got that far yet. But you know, at this point, if the board's supportive, the council's supportive, and we'll keep moving, staff will keep moving down, and we'll start checking off, you know, what needs to get done when. But you know, at this point, if you guys are interested, then we'll keep doing that. If you're not interested, you know, then you know, we'll go on to other things, and we'll focus on Waconia and do that. So I'm not asking for tonight. I don't need a absolute for sure you're in. Just, you know, is there enough information or enough interest that you want to proceed further? And you know, city staff and county staff can work together to figure out.
Well, I, for one, would like to proceed further and get to understand more about this. It seems like this isn't fully baked yet, but the concept of the pilot, I'm not opposed to. I think Victoria residents would like the ability to, instead of having to drive down to Chaska, to come here. But before I would commit us, I'd like to kind of look longer term to say what kind of a burden are we taking on, and I'd also like to kind of think a little bit more and talk with Doug about how he sees this flowing here. I'm just concerned that with the parking concerns we have here, those 2 weeks before the election, that may cause a ripple effect of other problems, and do we really want to do that? So I want some time to kind of think about that, and I'd like staff to kind of think a little bit more about it. Council, your comments?
This is probably not a good year to do it for us because of the parking issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should be safe and not do it. The other thing is there's a cost here. The cost per vote, if you figured out the cost per vote, the cost of these absentee ballots has got to be sky high compared to the cost of a vote in one of our precincts. So in the end, 1, 2, 3 years down the road, we will have to absorb that somehow. And, you know, the amount of additional control, if you're doing onesie, twosies all day long on absentee ballots, you know, somebody's got to be keeping track of that. Somebody's got to be organizing that. Somebody's got to be overseeing that. So it's not just processing a piece of paper or something at the counter. There is a whole organization that has to be built to handle just these few thousand votes. So there's tremendous cost per vote here. And so
I
I'd
agree. I
I'd
don't
be
disagree with that.
against doing it this year for sure. Just my opinion.
So, other comments, Council?
I think you've said this, but let me just clarify. The elections equipment update piece is completely independent, right? And this is happening.
Yeah. Yes, I should have.
Not the carrot.
It was in my head. It was in my head. I didn't share that. But yeah, this is not. They're not tied in any way. You get the good deal on election equipment, regardless. That's the county board decision. We budgeted for it. You know, we took care. We thought that was the right thing to do. This is, like I said, is just an opportunity that we're exploring with. You know, we explored with our board, and they had an interest in pursuing with the cities, and you know, but yeah, it's completely up to you guys, and we completely understand. Just like at Chanhassen, it's not the right year for them. You know, it's up to you guys. And at this point, in terms of it not being fully baked, you're right. We have not done this before. We know other counties have done it, so we're gearing up for it. We're going to do it with whatever cities, however number we got, we're going to do it with them. But it will be a learning curve, and you know, we'll get through it. And if you guys are in this year, and great. If not, you know, we'll come back to you and give you another shot in 2 years.
Councilmember Gregory, comments?
Yeah, I kind of agree with some comments that have already been made. The parking issue is going to be a real problem, and if we might be under construction on Stagger Lake Lane, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I like the idea, but I think we've got to do a lot more.
Councilmember Corwin?
I think it really comes down to staff and their willingness to support it, and obviously we need to understand the cost related to it, and we don't know yet in terms of the detail. But I echo all the previous concerns about this.
So based on the parking, I think I'm hearing a consensus develop that says we should probably pass for this year because we've got some unique challenges, and then maybe Chanhassen, Chaska can kind of be the pilot programs, if you will, and then maybe we can pick that up in a year in the future.
Mr. Mayor, let me just clarify. It is Waconia at this point that's in. Chaska's not. Chan's not.
Oh, okay.
You guys are. You know, we're here tonight to decide. I just want to point out too the timing of the traffic is is in late October, early November. It's those 2 weeks. At the end of the general election. Not the primary. We don't see the traffic in the primary or for the first couple of weeks of the general election. It really is just the late fall where we think there's going to be the parking issue. I don't know how that fits with your construction plans. Just want to clarify. It's not. We don't see it as being a long-term thing throughout the process. It really is just at the tail end where the volume picks up.
All right. So unless I'm wrong, it sounds like the council isn't up for trying that this year. Council, would you agree?
Agreed.
Agree.
All right. So I appreciate you coming in the effort. I'm sure we'll look at this issue again at some point in the future.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. The next item is I'm going to call for an open the public hearing. Well, wait a second. Before I open the public hearing, Kara, do you want to give a short introduction, please?
Certainly. Just find this presentation. Okay, so Mayor and Council, tonight's agenda item, I'm going to come back to this one, but I'm going to start with this just to remind everybody where we are in the process. So this relates to the Steiger Lake Lane street and parking improvement project that was authorized for preliminary design a year ago now, it seems, May 22nd of 2017. In the fall, the council authorized final design. We had a couple of property owner meetings, and I want to clarify that those property owner meetings were specifically limited to the property owners who live or own property, I should say, abutting the improvement, to specifically lay out the assessment process and how that all works and talk about construction impacts to each property. On May 12th, the City Council accepted a feasibility report and called for a public improvement hearing. That public hearing was held on April 9th. That night, the City Council opted to order only stage 2 of the improvement, so I will jump back to my previous slide to clarify that once I get through this. The council also approved plans and specifications and called for a final assessment hearing and ordered advertisement for bids. That brings us to tonight, where we have the City Council considering accepting bids and awarding a contract, as well as levying the final assessments. And then if the council moves forward, we would have pre-con meeting in the next few weeks, and construction would start. The construction's anticipated to be about 12 weeks in duration. Right now, the contractor, the low bidder, isn't thinking they would start until right after 4th of July, but we can't really verify that till we actually award the project. In terms of the project scope, this is the same graphic that the City Council has seen a number of times, showing what had been initially contemplated as the project was the complete improvement of Steiger Lake Lane from City Hall out to Highway 5. After discussion along the way, staff was recommending to split the project essentially into 2 phases and complete what the consultant in their plans had referred to as stage 2 of the project this year. So the remaining work would be deferred until some future time as the city thought it was appropriate to proceed with that improvement. What might drive that would be pavement condition or need for additional parking down on the east end if redevelopment were to occur in the area. The break point for stage 2 was set based on recommendation of the engineer based on the high point of the road. So splitting the project here works from a stormwater management perspective. If we extended it, say, further down to the public works driveway, the stormwater management plan wouldn't have worked anymore, so it was not feasible. So stage 2 includes complete reconstruction of the street, improvements to utilities, storm sewer, sidewalk, streetscape, and amenities, essentially continuing the same package that exists downtown today out to this location here. So Bids were open for this project on May 10th. We received bids from 4 contractors, as shown here. The low bidder was Kuski Construction at $767,000. Once you add in the additional other project-related costs, such as engineering, design, construction administration, and so on and so forth, the current estimated budget is about 1.12. When we presented this project at the last presentation of the City Council, so before we bid the project, we were sitting at 1.26. So with the favorable bids, we're about $134,000 under the budget that had been previously set for the project. This project does include special assessments to property owners adjacent to the proposed improvements. Because we're just talking about stage 2, we're talking about just the property shown in this area. These are the property owners that were notified of the final assessment hearing. This is a list of the properties that are included, as well as what their proposed assessment amounts. If you might recall, we spent some time discussing this, but the final assessments are based on the benefit analysis work that was completed by an outside consultant. So the assessments are still based on benefit. They remain unchanged. If we applied the bid amounts and recalculated the assessments based on front foot, they're still higher than the amounts based on benefit. So if you recall, in our report, we were recommending that the lowest of the amounts be used for the assessments. I will note, related to the assessments, that the city did receive a letter from Laketown Investment LLC. The council was provided a copy of that letter. But the letter serves as their official legal notice to the city that they object to the proposed assessment and are reserving their right to appeal said assessment. If there's questions about that, the city attorney can certainly speak to it. The last piece of this agenda item, there are 3 parts, is consideration of construction testing proposals. So if the City Council elects to proceed with the project, we do need to authorize a testing company to do the required construction testing. So we solicited proposals for that work. We received them from both the consultants listed and are recommending that we proceed with Braun Intertech. They did the geotechnical work during the design phase, so there is some advantage to having the same company working on both parts of the project. So what has to happen here tonight? The first action item would be to hold the final assessment hearing. After you've completed the final assessment hearing related to the assessments, then the City Council would need to consider approval of a resolution accepting bids and awarding a contract. The next item would be consider approval of a resolution adopting the final assessment role for stage 2, and then lastly, dealing with the Braun testing services proposals. I believe that's all I have to say at this point, unless there's questions.
Thank you, Kara. Before we get to questions, I want to go ahead and open the public hearing that we're required to have. At this point, the public hearing is open. Is there anybody that would like to speak? Please come up, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Michael Canote. I live in Waconia, but my property is at 1530, 1540, and 1550 Stagger Lake Lane, and I want to reserve the right to appeal the assessment. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So that's different. The other one was Laketown, right? So there's 2?
Correct. That would be, so Laketown Investments LLC was the source of the letter, and this is this property.
Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Cal Haskin, the principal of Laketown Investments. Home address 9480 County Road 43, and again, the subject property, as referred to in your assessment roll, is 1570 Commercial Boulevard, Victoria. And again, we're reserving our right to appeal the assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there anybody else that would like to address the council in the public hearing? Seeing none, I move that we close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The public hearing is now closed. At this point, let me open it up for discussion for the council. Does the council have any questions of Kara?
Yes, please. The last time this came in front of the council, it was when the original assessments had been calculated, and my recollection is we asked for the report. I think there was some reluctance to give the whole report, but there was going to be a summary, basically the methodology used to calculate the assessments. I've had some travel in between. I apologize if there was something sent out that I missed, but I haven't seen that.
So it's been provided to all of the property owners affected by the project. I don't recall at what point it was shared with the city council, but it was provided to all the property owners.
I don't think it was given to the council. It was given to the property owners, and I think that was our understanding of where the people that wanted it at that point. I can give it to them.
I asked for it, and I did receive a copy.
Okay.
My assumption was that all council members received a copy.
I'm not positive of that.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so, but.
All right, well, we need to make sure that these kind of materials, when they go out to one council member, they should go out to every council member, please. At this point, the Councilmember Striegel, if nobody else has seen this, I'd like to move forward, but if you haven't seen this, do we need to table this to give you a chance to look at that? Or are you comfortable moving forward? I'll defer to the council members that hadn't seen it.
I haven't seen it, but I'm comfortable moving forward.
I'm really not comfortable moving forward. I've not been a huge fan of this project from the beginning, and we've got 2 objections already, or reserve, right to reserve already on record. So it tells me there's some question marks about how this is laid out and the value to the people who are going to be most directly affected by it.
I have a question about the financing. At what point does the financing, is that determined in terms of paying for this?
So now that the bids have been received and we have an estimate of the final costs, it's been provided to the finance director to determine what the final financing would be. So I'm going to defer to her to talk.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we actually do not have to determine a final amount for our bonds until beginning of July. So given that there's a 30-day time frame for the actual appeals to come in from the assessments, we'll know at that point in time how many appeals we're going to have and what the potential loss could be on revenues. So we can incorporate that into the bonds, and if we want to have a contingency for that, we could do that.
Thank you. So approving this tonight, there will be a subsequent discussion around financing and how this will be paid for. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that, and thank you, Kelly, very much. This isn't a parking solution. And the reason I voted for this the last time is that this is a redevelopment function in my mind for redeveloping the east end of Steger Lake Lane. And I'm in favor of a redevelopment option, and the city is driven by development, and I'm concerned that over the past year and a half, we have not seen a lot of development projects come to us anew as compared to previous years. And I would like to gather some more information on that and ask our city manager if he could do a comparison for us to understand how many projects are we seeing coming in now versus a year ago. And so we've had overwhelming response in terms of providing a parking solution. I have stated this multiple times. This isn't a parking solution. Parking for the downtown must address the central core. Putting 26 lanes or parking places down Steger Lake Lane does not solve the issue in the central core. And so I'm interested in redevelopment. It's clear that at this point in time, the 13.5 acres is on hold at best, and we need to drive development activities. So to the extent that this includes a commitment to providing funding for parking in the central core, I'm willing to move forward with it. Otherwise, I will not be moving forward with it.
Okay, can we get the resolutions up on the?
Just one more question. Gary, have you, or Kelly, have you calculated how much left would be from the 1.2 Victoria Flats TIF now that it's come under budget? What's the dollar amount that's left over? Or haven't you looked at that?
We had been projecting about 200,000 would be left of the TIF under the prior circumstances. So with the favorable bids, it could potentially be 300,000, but we kind of want to wait and see what happens with assessments, and because we'd have additional fees with that for.
But let's look at that for a second. There was a total of what, $50,000 there in those two assessments that are being appealed?
Approximately, it's a little more than 50,000.
So 60,000. So 60,000. Yeah. We've got 150,000 roughly of budget that's still available. Those assessments are not going to go down to zero. We used the right process. We used an independent consultant. They may be adjusted a little bit, but it's not going to significantly change it. And even if it did, we have more than enough money through the TIF to cover any decrease in this assessment. This is a small piece of the overall financing package. If it's 60,000 now, I can't imagine the assessments, even if they're appealed, are going to significantly change, given that we did use the correct legal process in the analysis. Is that correct, Bob?
Well, Mayor and Council, you actually did belt and suspenders. There's no statutory requirement that a city get a benefit appraisal, what we've called a benefit appraisal, which I understand some of you haven't seen, but you will see. That's not statutorily required. That's just when a city is concerned about whether its proposed assessments are going to be sustained or not. If they get challenged, cities will do that. So we've been kind of protective of
preemptive, if you will,
by doing that. Yeah.
So I would interpret that the number is not going to significantly change. I think we need to move forward with the project. There's more than just parking involved. It connects the central downtown. We've had all of these arguments in discussions in previous council meetings. At this point, Councilmember Gregory, go ahead.
One more comment. Would a delay in this process affect the construction timing at all?
We're getting pretty late, so we lost the last council meeting, so we're already kind of 2 weeks behind where we were comfortable.
Right.
How long are the bids good for?
I would imagine it has our standard 60-day provision, so the bids would still be valid. The concern would be whether we would run out of construction season to get complete. But right now, they weren't necessarily talking about starting until after the 4th, but
it's almost June 1st, so.
Right.
And just a point to the mayor's comment, the TIF was for infrastructure, not just parking, so it was for infrastructure on adjacent property.
Right. This meets all of the TIF requirements. That was one of the two proposed uses anyways when the TIF was approved.
Yeah, but my point is it doesn't solve the problem, what we're trying to solve. Parking in the central core.
Can I get the first resolution up? I move we approve the resolution accepting bids and awarding a contract for the Steiger Lake Lane street and parking improvements. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Point of discussion, go ahead.
Well, again, since we had the last vote, I think there have been a number of property and business operators from downtown who have been pretty emphatic in their feeling that this is kind of the parking to nowhere and it won't really fix the problem. And I look at the lack of development proposals that have come forward over the last year or 18 months, and I wonder if it's because we haven't taken care of the businesses that are already here. And doing this isn't going to change that, and then it just becomes money spent with no return on it. Typically, this kind of infrastructure would be paid for at the time of redevelopment and would be more a development cost. And so it feels to me like we're shifting development cost onto the general fund taxpayers of the city of Victoria. So I think it's the wrong project at the wrong time. And again, I think we've heard a fair amount from the business and property owners downtown that would support that. Also, as we're talking about a parking study, this feels out of step, premature, like we're going to get an answer and it's going to be completely conflicting with this, and then we're going to be too far down the road to do anything about it. So I'm trying to figure out what is the real rush to do this. At one point, we talked about having this as reserve parking in the event that we did a bigger, and I think at the time the idea was a parking ramp project that would take that entire lot out of service for a while. And that's another area that has been spoken of, I think, by a number of business and property owners, that's overkill. That's not necessary, certainly not at this time. And so with that kind of recalibration, and I was pretty vocally supporting a parking ramp, but it seems to me like that is certainly not at this time appropriate. So so then the need to do something to have extra parking in reserve, again, a smaller project in the core, such as acquiring the private property and paving that, would have a very minimal disruption, and spending, $1.128 million going down Steger Lake Lane would seem to me to be inappropriate or unnecessary at this time. And again, I think that when we did originally approve the Victoria Flats building, the biggest concern by all of the existing business owners and building owners in the downtown was parking. And so again, to take this further to the east without taking care of those people that are paying taxes every year feels like an inappropriate use of the money. And Beth from the salon tonight and the other businesses that are on the west end are not going to feel any help from this. So again, you heard it directly tonight. This doesn't seem to me to be the right project. So for that reason, I am opposed to this.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I've spoken with members of the VBA, and there's a number of things that we can do to increase parking that don't cost a lot of money. Talking with members of making sure that we fill up all of the outlying parking spaces, including those public parking places at the Victoria Flats. There's a number of outside the normal parking spaces where the business community, the business owners and the business employees need to take some of those outside parking spaces and leave the parking spaces that are closer to their businesses, leave those intact. I've also spoken extensively with someone very close to the Creamery Project restaurant, and Mary's got some very good plans to deal with parking, and I won't steal her thunder on that, but she's taken the bull by the horns and dealing with it on her own. We have some vacant lots that are available, which if the business community got together, could look at acquiring or leasing some of those on their own. So there are solutions out there. We've got 85 to 100 grand into this project already with all of these studies, and it sounds like there's a possibility of scrapping that at this point. And I disagree with that.
So I don't consider it scrapping it. We have a lot of understanding. But I also look at it from an understanding perspective that if we go forward with this project right now, we're not listening to our constituents. Period.
Well, I would disagree. I have constituents actually saying they'd like to see the downtown connected to the east side of downtown. And there's other people that have other opinions.
I agree with that, not without providing a solution for the central core.
All right. So we've discussed this enough. It's time for a vote. There's a valid motion on the table that's been seconded.
Mr. Mayor, can I just have perspective? Kara, can you for about 30 seconds stick up the slide that you had that showed the history of this project? Okay, so if I just want to understand this. We authorized proceeding on this project in May 2017, and we authorized design in November 2017. In March, we accepted the feasibility report, and in April, performed more public hearings. So we've pretty much done our due diligence, had quite a bit of discussion on this.
Spent a year on it.
So I'll be very clear that last time we talked about this, I was not going to vote for it, and the only reason that I did was because my understanding is that from a financing standpoint, we have a decision to be made down the road, and we would not preclude doing parking in the central core. And that's why I voted for it. And now I'm putting a stake in the ground tonight saying I'm not willing to go forward unless we make a commitment as a council to do that, because my fear is this is going to be rammed right down and we're not going to address the problem that we're here to solve. And so let me be abundantly clear. I'm willing to negotiate. If you're willing to commit funds for the central core tonight, I'm willing to move forward from this. If you're not, I'm not willing to go forward right now.
Do you have an alternative motion or an amendment to the motion that?
Everything that I've heard right now says we need another $750,000. If we have to spend all the TIF on Steger Lake Lane, we need at least $750,000 more to provide a central core solution. So if we're going to make a motion tonight and include the central core, it has to be at least $750,000.
So that item isn't on the agenda. We can't bring up another funding in another use. This item is specifically limited to Steger Lake Lane. We've gone through that. We've got a resolution on the table. If you want to bring that up at another council meeting, you're more than welcome to do that. But we can't insert that in the middle of this discussion.
I understand.
I don't believe that in the course of the previous discussions in the process, the progress of this project, that we heard from the business owners, the building owners, the property owners.
Property owner open house on March 8th, 2018. Here it is.
And so, again, I've been feeling like we weren't taking care of our existing businesses, and that should be our priority before we move forward somewhere else. And we have heard quite a bit since the last one. So it was fine for me to do the conceptual work. It was fine for me to get an understanding of the overall costs. It was fine to get to the point of understanding what the project looked like, but not to the point of actually letting the contract go without more information, and now we have it.
All right, can we get the resolution up? This motion is already on the table. It's been seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay.
No.
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2. Council members Striegel and Crowley voted against. Did you get that, Cindy? Okay. Can we get the next resolution, please?
This is it.
I move we approve resolution adopting final assessment role for Stage 2 of the Steger Lake Lane street and parking improvements. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay.
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 This motion passes 3-2. The last part is I move that we authorize Braun Intertech to complete the geotechnical construction testing services for the Steger Lake Lane street and parking improvements. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oops, do we second?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a second on that
Motion.
There, now we go. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay.
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 Cindy, you get... Okay, that completes that item. Let me see here. Okay, the next item, new business, Planning Commission items. Kara, is this yours?
Laura.
Laura.
Laura's got
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
first one.
Laura, apologize.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. This evening before you is a request for a conditional use permit amendment at 1400 Steiger Lake Lane. The applicant is Waconia Dodge. They have submitted an application for an amendment to an existing conditional use permit on the property at 1400 Steiger Lake Lane on behalf of the owner, Water Sports Investments West, LLC. The property is approximately 1.1 acres located on 2 adjacent parcels. It is on the edge of the Central Business District zoning district and is also within the Shoreland District. The current conditional use permit on the site allows for outdoor storage, which is screened, and outdoor display of 4 recreational vehicles. The current building is approximately 5,100 square feet, which has a showroom, some office space, and some shop space in the back. The subject property is adjacent to municipal properties, the Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail, as well as Highway 5. The applicant is proposing the following improvements to the site to change the use to used automobile sales, to have minor automobile repair for the owner's inventory, which means automobiles which are owned by the occupant, as well as automobile detailing, which includes washing, cleaning, waxing, and similar detailing actions for customers by appointment only, as well as some not included on the PowerPoint, but also some accessory installation for customers by appointment only. They are requesting an outdoor display of automobiles for sale. Within that request includes 6 pads located around the perimeter, on the front of the building and to the side on facing Steiger Lake Lane. 1 bouldered landscaped pad in the front lawn area, as well as parking for retail display, a number of inventory within the parking lots. They have also proposed updating of the landscaping along Steiger Lake Boulevard, or excuse me, Steiger Lake Lane, as well as the removal of there's some screening on the site currently, which has some plastic slatting in a chain link fence, proposed that removal. As seen in your report, the Planning Commission has recommended approval for this item with an additional condition that the that the number of parking spaces reserved for employees and or customers be kept at 12 parking stalls. This is reflective of the code language within City Code of required parking area. And an item that planning staff is asking for direction from the City Council on. The applicant has requested for a reduction in the parking requirement of that those spaces not all be required to be reserved for employees and or customers. But the parking requirement is shown with the calculations above. 8 spaces would be required based off of square footage of showroom, and 4 spaces required for the open sales and rental lots. The applicant, since the Planning Commission meeting, has provided staff with a display of the 2 different options of where those parking areas would be reserved. In yellow are the customer spots that they anticipate to reserve, and then in blue are employee and or flex spaces. They've provided these areas to meet the Planning Commission recommendation of 12 spaces. This would leave 32 spaces for retail display, as well as the 6 pad sites and 1 landscape boulder for retail. The applicant has requested that the City Council consider a reduction, and as shown on here, with 4 spaces for customers and then 4 spaces for employees and/or flex. This, as included in your packet, was due to this request due to the concern that there wouldn't be as much of a need for parking as the parking ordinance requires. Additionally, the site has 48 spaces, and so the site has room for 48 spaces. It's just a matter of what needs to be set aside, and that is where planning staff would look to the City Council on direction for moving forward. These 2 exhibits are examples that I have put together or with the colors. Once we have direction from the City Council, we will request that the applicant, and as one of the conditions of the resolution in front of you tonight, to resubmit a final site plan with the site plan showing specifically which spaces would be used for employees and which would be used for customers and/or those flex spaces. And then recommend that finalized site plan be adopted with the resolution of approval. So before you tonight is a draft resolution reflecting the conditions that the Planning Commission recommended of the 12 spaces. Again, that's an element up for that planning staff is looking for your direction on, and should you change it, then would need to amend that resolution prior to approval.
Thank you, Laura. Can you go back to the overall picture of the site plan? If you go by the bold line in there, it looks like the round pad, is outside of the property boundary. So that's not the property boundary, is it?
Correct. So this site plan was drawn using as its base I believe a meets and bounds survey from 2006, and that because we were concerned from a planning side of the layout of the parking and the dimensions, but if you refer here, you can kind of see how the yellow line generally follows the parcel boundary as far as, Carver County is concerned. So that is the updated. I'm not entirely sure why the 2006 doesn't accurately show, but since
the bottom line is it is on the property.
Correct.
Okay,
we wouldn't allow the boulder landscaped improvement unless it was on the property.
I kind of assumed that, but I wanted to make sure.
No,
Okay.
I totally understand.
All right, Council. Doug, did you want to speak to this?
Mr. Mayor, you have my memo, which I'm suggesting that this use in this location does not in accordance with the adopted downtown plan, is not in accordance with the comprehensive plan for the old, I don't think the old comprehensive plan, but certainly not the new comprehensive plan, which you're going to send forward tonight. So I just think it's a gateway piece of property that the use that's proposed is not in accordance with what you're trying to achieve at the gateway of the city.
All right, thank you. Council?
With respect to the parking issue, currently, if I'm understanding, you have approximately 50 to 52 cars for sale there. You're just a head nod. Okay. And you're required to have 4 customer parking spaces? And no employee?
Would you mind coming up and just stating your name and?
I'm sorry.
Right, for the record, they can't
That's
hear them
fine.
at home.
Andy Strong, Waconia Dodge, 905 Strong Drive, Waconia.
So you want to use the property for this, you're not the property owner, correct?
Correct. We're in
Okay.
the midst of trying to purchase it. So we are currently in the 1980th Street location.
Got it. Okay, sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, my fault. I should have brought to the podium. So you have 4 parking spaces. That's employee and customer.
Correct.
Okay, and here you only have space for a total of 48.
Correct.
Okay, now with respect to the detailing that you'd like to do, how do you anticipate that working? I mean, you have at least 1 employee for detailing, and how many cars waiting? How many cars in the
Well,
process?
we'd schedule as a needed basis.
Just as needed, so
Yes,
you're not
so,
anticipating 3-4 cars waiting to be detailed?
Correct. We currently run a detail center in Norwood, Young America, and Waconia, and we just schedule them in. The cars go inside, pretty much get done, they go out, and they're gone.
Okay.
So customers pick them up. So I think there's a lot of, along with that, there's a lot of space between the parking spots that somebody might just pull in forward, and that's where they pull in.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, at our current location, that's what a lot of people do. That's a rounded driveway. People pull in, get out, and they walk around and look.
Yeah, that's what I've always done every time I look.
So I get the amount, but that's what most people do, and people also do that in our Waconia location. They pull up, and they pull up by the car they want to look at. They get out, they walk around. We typically greet them, and then they do that. And in our Waconia location, we only have 8 in front of our facility, 8 customer parking spots with 2 handicap. That's the customer parking side of it. We have, we sell about 100 cars a month over there. So, and we do pretty well with that. We have
That facility is
employee
huge.
parking on the back.
That facility is huge compared to this one, isn't it?
Correct. But there's only 8, yeah. So 8 customer. Now, when we had the planning commission meeting, they took we originally wanted to do service. That piece came out, so I don't compare our service end of our business. There is service customer parking sitting there that I'm not talking about, but retail customer parking for people come in and purchase a vehicle, there's 8 in the front of the building. So with 2 handicap. So.
Okay, council, questions?
So, and I guess this is probably as much for Doug, but
Yeah.
please, I've got some thoughts. So up until this year, for the last few years, there's been a boat dealership there. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how that is significantly different than this. There was a number of boats on display outdoors, a number of boats around the yard that were in various stages of preparation and/or for sale. And so I'm trying to understand, would you have been opposed to that when that application came forward as well?
Difficult to speculate, but I think it is a much more acceptable use. That conditional use permit you issued only allowed 4 vehicles to be seen. You now have a proposal where you tear down all the bushes along the entire road there, and you have 48 vehicles available right as you come into downtown. So I think that use that you did propose, the current conditional use permit is not as disruptive as the one that's proposed now.
I thought that the screening was going to be, the planning commission recommended that remain, that it wouldn't be removed.
I don't know what is the
Mr. Mayor.
proposal.
Mr. Mayor, I can clarify. The Planning Commission recommended within the resolution as one of the conditions that the screening along the LRT trail be continued, and that the materials that are serving there today could continue to utilize as screening from that use. And then along Steiger Lake Lane, that the screening be removed and that a decorative fence that exists along the property, the front part of the property, be continued along there, kind of as a buffer, but also as an aesthetic element. So, or if not that fence, a similar type of fence. And the applicant has also indicated the landscaping improvements that would include some of the trimming down of trees and Everything's just a little bit overgrown on the site.
Thank you. So is it your thought in terms of that screening that you want to minimize it and use that as a part of the display area, or just improve the look of what's there? What's your thought on that?
The thought was to remove it. Well, originally the thought was to move the slatting only, but that didn't sound like that was going to fly. Correct?
Correct. With the
So Laura and talking to Laura, we came up with a plan of taking it out and extending the fencing that exists or similar type of fencing along Steiger Lake Lane.
Is it decorative fencing or is it,
Currently,
right?
currently it is.
What's the finished product going to look like?
It'd be decorative to similar what's going along the back, along the other part of the property until you get into the storage area.
It's like a black wrought iron type
Yeah,
fencing.
something like that.
All right, so it's not a chain link fence.
That's what's
Oh, there it
currently
is.
there.
Okay.
So assuming that this would go forward, would you be vacating the current facility that you're using on the other end of town?
Correct. Yes.
And if I understand, that's kind of cramped and a little messy in terms of moving cars and people around. Is that
The problem with
part
that-
of your motivation for getting?
The motivation is really having the shop area. We don't have the detail bay at the current facility. You can probably fit like a Nissan Maxima or a smaller vehicle, so we struggle with that. And that's our real motivation, is the ability to have a bigger shop space to move that stuff around and deal with it.
Okay.
So, and the other thing is the indoor display area. We have customers or people who'd like to, they currently bring their cars to Rogers, Minnesota, and down to Mankato to sell the classic cars. So we have 200 parties who'd like to bring them to this location and sell them inside, so we can put them inside. So you're talking about Vipers and maybe some higher-end restored products. So we have 2 people who'd like to do that. So.
Okay, thank you.
So that's another
Is there, if this would not be approved, what would be your plan for that site? Will you remain in that current building if we can't find a way to make this one work?
I guess that determines partly the landowner that currently owns it. We are currently not in contract with them. So we took it over in 2013 when the place was looking pretty terrible, so we came in, felt like we did a good job. We love the building's gorgeous. I think it's great coming into town, and it's not, the problem is really that we'd like to have an indoor showroom for this classic car and this auto detailing. And that's really our biggest concern over there.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, keep going.
And they're smaller, but just a couple quick questions. What's your long-term plan or goal for it? I mean, is this something you see becoming a permanent, long-term part of your business operation in the same way that it's planned here today?
Yeah.
And then last question is, how many employees do you have down at the current facility at the other end of town, and how many would you anticipate here?
We had one for a very long time. And thinking we were going to do this place, we just hired an additional one who started, just assuming this is going to go forward. And we have no detailers, so we'd bring in one full-time detailer and these 2 sales people that we have that share roles. So now if we got busy, would we have another additional person come over from our Victoria or from our Norwood location to help out as detailing? Yeah, but that wouldn't be a permanent person sitting there all the time.
Okay.
We're kind of shifting people around between Norwood, Young America, and Waconia. We go back and forth. We also rent space in Waconia at the J. Carver facility. So we ship people between those 2 locations.
Okay. Sorry, I actually did have one
go ahead.
quick question. I guess as I'm reading the reports, it kind of seems like it bounces back and forth. Is there a solution or a proposal here that meets your needs and meets our needs in terms of the number of parking spaces for non-display, non-sale vehicles?
Well, I was hoping around the 8 level. I mean, did you guys see the email, the traffic I put in? We currently run through the 1980 place.
I think so, yeah.
It's not a huge amount of volume, and I don't anticipate a bunch more volume, but I got it here.
It's like 8 to 12 kind of.
Which is pretty bad. But 14 was 10 a month, 15 was 12 a month, 16's 89, and 17 was 11. I'm sorry, 89 for the year, 8 a month in 2016. So, you only control the people that work for you and how well they log stuff. But even like I said in my email, if you triple that, you're not talking about a huge amount of volume. And that I'd be shocked, and like I said in my email, if we could get over 20 car sales, 22 car sales a month out of that place. It's not feasible with 45, 50 cars on the ground or whatever it ends up being, So it's the detail center and the classic car thing, or I didn't say classic car, but the ability to put higher end cars inside a facility where people come by them. And we have the two willing parties that would like to do it, so.
Thanks, I'm done. Thanks for your patience.
Yep, thanks. So I'm not opposed to this. You're at one end of town, you're basically moving to the other end of town, you're adding additional services. If we go back to the picture real quick, it looked like everything was overgrown towards what would that be, the west end. You're going to clean all of that up and extend thank you, right there.
Yep.
You'll clean all that up. Oh, no, there's a chain link fence in behind there, but you're going to take that out and you're going to extend this more decorative fence that we see over by the building itself, right?
Yep.
So then that'll go down just on this side, but you're going to retain the screening on the regional trail on the back side of the building, right?
Yep.
So I'm not concerned, I just want to make sure that the finished product is attractive and it doesn't look run down. And it sounds to me like you're doing that. And again, just moving from one part of the downtown to another part of the downtown and adding additional services. So I'd like to see this go through. I go back and forth on the parking. You don't think you need, the Planning Commission recommended 12 spots. That's what the code requires. And you wanted to cut the 12 down because you don't think you're going to need that traffic, and you want to cut it down to 6 in addition to the 4 reserved for the employee parking?
Total of 8.
Or wait, I have that backwards, right?
Total of 8.
Total of 8 instead of a total of 12?
Yeah. And I guess we'd be willing to monitor the traffic and take a look at it. And obviously, we're not going to want to upset customers. They don't have a place to park. Obviously, we're going to change the situation and get stuff out of there. Because, there's be no reason to have us upset customers that don't have a place to park. It'd be ridiculous for us.
And I think I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong here, do you get a lot of your sales through the internet? And then people will come in and look at the vehicle before they actually purchase it?
That's where most of it happens, yes. And that's in any car. 95% of people shop online before they come in the store. They have a big decision already made before they decide to purchase. They just got to drive it and see if they like it. That's the stats. So
that's what I always think about is the code language when it's written and how the car buying experience has changed so dramatically in the last 5-10 years that maybe that language and those
comment?
requirements are.
Yep, please.
I have to admit I'm struggling. I am proud that you are a business owner in Victoria, and I want to see you continue. But I have to echo somewhat our city manager's comment, and that is this, I'll say it in a different way, is this the first best use for that land? To a certain extent, I don't think it's up to me to dictate how that's used. I want free enterprise to figure that out. But where I'm challenged is this council just voted to spend $1.2 million to beautify the East End, which in my mind is a redevelopment project. Do I want to have the city spend $1.2 million and have a car lot put there? And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to be derogatory. That came out really poorly. I love car lots. I love to walk car lots. But is that the first best use? And that's where I'm struggling.
I can't tell you the best use is. I could tell you probably get somebody a heck of a lot worse than us.
Yeah, I understand.
The current cup you have, obviously that goes to the property. You could obviously get somebody come in there and do something you might not like. I don't know. That's all I can say is I think we run a pretty solid business. If you go by our facility in Waconia or wherever we have this one out here, we keep them very clean. We don't sell per se junk.
I'm not questioning you. You run a great business. You run great vehicles. It's really, for me, is in light of the money we're spending on that, is this the right fit? And I'm not coming up with a good answer.
Are you making any improvements to the building itself? Exterior, just upgrades or anything to the facade or?
Well, there'd be a brand sign or a sign on the front. They'd have to go through the approval process for that, but something similar to what they currently have on there or just took off. But I don't know what, landscaping. I think the landscaping is probably the biggest thing. And I don't know if I'd say I would say it's overgrown, but I would say it's maybe like that to maybe hide the fence a little bit, possibly. I could say it could use some cleaning up, but I don't know. Conkey owned that building originally, they're a landscaper. I'm assuming they had some pretty nice landscaping in there originally when they did the job. So I don't think our plan would become cut down all the trees and stuff like that, and maybe just trim them up and top them a little bit and clean it up. But
Clean it up, not necessarily remove it all?
No, I don't think that'd look right. So.
Well, and this is an authorized use. It's already zoned for this. We're not changing any of that. I don't see where we should get in your way, at least in my opinion. Just for the record, I should probably say that I did buy a car from Waconia Dodge.
Thank you.
And I have attended a couple of car shows out at your Waconia location. Not that that will change anything here for me, but I'll just put that out there. So additional comments from anybody else on the council?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think the mayor or the city manager's sentiments are accurate in the sense that this is not the ideal property that our comprehensive plan demands. However, I look at the history of this property, and before this boat dealer was there was a struggling snowmobile dealer there, and the boat dealer didn't do well. I know now he's building a new shop on Highway 7, but before that, the building sat. So, I mean, I feel between a rock and a hard place to say that this is not within the vision that we have in the comprehensive plan is probably true, but I wouldn't want to see this corner sitting empty like we have seen it. And I think if these gentlemen have the intent to really spruce it up, I mean, the building, to me, we have pictures of what the building was supposed to be. The guy before the boat dealer was going to enhance the building, and he never did. But I think it's not a bad fit for the corner. I wish we could have some kind of a conditional use permit that wasn't lifelong, and you guys could run your car dealer for 10 years and then see what happens. But I'm inclined, as much as I trust the judgment of the city manager, I'm inclined to say this is a nice corner. People see it when they come around the corner on Highway 5 and they see Victoria, and I don't want this place sitting empty. I want something that looks like there's activity. And if they come in and look at a car and then go over to the brewery, that'd be great. You know,
And
so
that might be part of the concept of these specialty cars. I don't know what that kind of people that brings in, but I'm assuming it brings in a different
well,
clientele.
I'm using that as an,
Yeah.
you know, it's rhetoric. We need to generate some energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this, if you guys do this right, it'll generate, there'll be energy when you come around that corner. You see something going on.
Yep.
I would agree.
Yeah, I don't like to see empty buildings either, and to wait for a perfect fit, I think that's kind of a mistake. It's an allowable use. I want to make it viable so that you succeed, and I think if you only have 4 parking spaces now, doubling that to 8, like I said, I want you to be successful, and so I mean, I'm okay with moving forward with even the 8 stalls. You put a lot of time and effort into this. You've been working on this a long time, and you've been a good resident of the community, and you want to put down some permanent roots. I think those are all good things. I think your current site, I think based on talking with you, it sounds like there's a lot of interest in that, and I don't think that building will stay empty long. And this site has been a challenge. And before the water sports, there was a garden center, and it was kind of a neat place, but it didn't last long. And I foresee you being there long enough where you get to a point where, if we do redevelop Steiger Lake Lane, I think eventually this property is going to be so valuable that a car dealership doesn't make sense anymore. I mean, that's my long-term vision for this
Right.
facility, and I'm good to move forward. And I share Doug's sentiments about, maybe car dealer is not perfect, but to wait for the perfect may not be the right solution.
Just say, I don't think we're waiting for the perfect solution because we just made the commitment to redevelop Steger Lake Lane. And who knows what that's going to drive. That will drive interest across the board along that corridor. But I just have...
I know
Okay.
Andy's here from Midwest Boat Works. Maybe he wants to
Andy, would you like to make
say something?
any comments real quick, briefly?
I sure can. Okay. You guys good?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
Andy Larson, 3705 South Cedar Drive. I'm the current owner of the property. And for us, I guess, to me, the redevelopment wouldn't have changed my application. And I don't see it as a pedestrian corner because we're so far away from downtown proper. There's a giant hole that's not going to lead walking traffic to this exact property until there was a lot more redevelopment. And I don't think redoing the road and a few parking stalls between Point A is going to change it with the sprinkler place and the kind of warehouse place and the city public works things. It's not a total retail thing. So for us, it worked well. We needed more space to be able to, our products are getting bigger and we were struggling on room, so that's why we spent a couple $1 million more and moved to Highway 7. But I think that the application would be good, and it's pretty hard to dictate exactly who shows up and wants to spend X amount on a property and what. I understand the city wanting to do what's right by the city, but these guys are good local businessmen that want to put down roots and bring jobs and customers to your town. That wouldn't be a bad thing.
All right, thank you. Can we get...
Is the building going sale as part of this, or is it just a lease?
For sale, yeah. They would be buying it, yeah.
Thanks.
Can we get the resolution up? Thank you.
Yes.
So where are... do we have a list that shows the conditions put in by the Planning Commission?
Can you pull that up for you?
And so this is a two-part question, Laura. Does the resolution actually incorporate all of the Planning Commission recommendations?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, it's taking a moment to load. The resolution, the conditions that are in the resolution, which hopefully will show up, thank you, that this highlighting, sorry, is everything related to the final exhibit, so that can be ignored. All of these conditions were presented to the Planning Commission. They recommended those in their approval, as well as the underlined provision here, which is specifically
The 12 parking
spells
stalls.
out the 12 parking spots to be signed and reserved for
Okay.
customers and/or employee parking.
Right, thank you. Can we go back to the resolution, please? So I move we approve resolution, number to be filled in, a resolution approving an amendment to the conditional use permit for retail sales and service operations requiring outside storage of products for sale at 1400 Steiger Lake Lane, Victoria, Minnesota, 55331, as submitted by CPS Holdings LLC, doing business as Waconia Dodge, with one change being the number of parking spots is reduced from 12 to 8. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes 4-1. You got it? Okay. Is there, that's all we needed for this?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Next item, unfinished business. Kara, this is yours, 9A, comp plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's 9 o'clock and raining, so I'm gonna go through my slides relatively quickly, but I'm certainly going to be prepared to answer any questions. And if a couple of steering committee members don't run away, they might be willing to comment as well. But You were provided in your packet a memo from Brad from HKGI outlining work that's underway. And you were provided a copy of the draft about a month ago. Three of you have had an opportunity to meet one-on-one with the consultant, or two-on-one with the consultant, depending on how that scheduling worked out. But what I wanted to do was just touch base and remind members of the public, mostly, of the process that this development of this comprehensive plan has gone through to get us to where we are today. So a steering committee was formed at the beginning of the process. People were asked to apply to be on that steering committee. We posted it and, sought out anybody who was interested in participating. It's made up of members, a couple of members from Planning Commission and the Park and Rec Committee, as well as business owners, landowners, developer types, a variety of representation of the community. Along the way, there's been briefing with the council through joint council planning commission, Park and Rec Committee meetings through the process, as well as touch base points along the way. A community survey was completed early in the process. 158 people elected to participate. As the council may recall, we used Social Pinpoint, which was a pretty fun opportunity where people could go on to an online web-based map and provide feedback about things that they wanted us to think about. We heard a lot of complaints about the intersection of County Road 11 and 5 by the Dairy Queen through that process, but also information on the comp plan. We had a booth at the Classic Car Night last year when the project was kicking off. We had a public open house in October that about 60 people attended, and then we did another community survey gauging feedback on some options that were under consideration. Also used Social Pinpoint once again to review those options. So it's been a fairly long process and a fairly robust one in terms of involvement from the community. And I certainly, with Ben leaving, I've attended all of the steering committee meetings now since he's left, and I would say they're a fairly impressive group of people that have been a pleasure to work with, engaged and focused on the job at hand. So certainly we thank them for all their work to date. The plan document, I'm just showing this quick slide here that shows the different chapters that are included in the comprehensive plan. That is a whole lot of pages that you've all received a link to. I did want to note that the process did include working from the Met Council population, household, and employment projections as a baseline, so that is required to be part of the process. Land use, of course, is a core part of the work with a focus on where growth will be accommodated. So the group certainly looked at infill opportunities within the existing city limits, redevelopment opportunities primarily in downtown, and then certainly new growth areas as established by the orderly annexation agreement with Laketown Township. Primarily focused on what we referred to as the south and west growth area. Several alternatives were developed and reviewed by the steering committee and shared with the public, as well as key landowners in the area. The end result of that is that the land use plan that's provided in the draft document more than accommodates the projected growth. So we wanted to make sure that we had enough land area planned that if the growth were to proceed more quickly than what the Met Council projections laid out, that we would be prepared for it and not caught behind, because who knows what the economy is going to do at any given point in time. But the document does still need to reflect the Met Council projections, so I just included this slide in here to remind everyone that the 2040 population projection is 15,400. We're getting close to, we're over 9 now, I think. So I think that was part of the concern about wanting to make sure we plan more if growth continues to happen quickly. So what's happening is the consultant was preparing revisions based on the feedback from initial review of the document by the steering committee, planning commission, and staff. There's a memo in your packet from Brad outlining what is being updated. What we're looking for from the City Council tonight is a motion to approve authorization to submit the draft 2040 comprehensive plan document. Sorry that I put the word plan in there twice. To adjacent jurisdictions and affected agencies for the required 6-month review. So what will happen is if the council is comfortable releasing it for review by our adjacent cities, the county, and the watershed district and the Carver County WMO, and an early review by Met Council, we'll still have the opportunity to continue to make revisions through that process. So any feedback we get from partners along the way, or any feedback the council might have as you've had a little bit more time to digest it, we would expect that once we have those comments generated, we would go back to the steering committee to consider that feedback and then propose any final edits to the document. We are required to allow 6 months for that jurisdictional review, but we'll certainly encourage our partners to submit their review sooner than later, so we wouldn't have to use that whole 6-month process. Once we have that final feedback and have final discussion with the steering committees, we would hold a public hearing, and then the plan would be submitted to Met Council. The city doesn't actually approve the document until after Met Council's completed their review. Any questions on that step Laura can speak to? With that, I would take any questions. Otherwise, this is what we're looking for. We do have 2 steering committee members here too.
Thank you. Council questions? I move we approve the authorization to submit the draft plan of the 2040 comprehensive plan document to adjacent jurisdictions and affected agencies for the required 6-month review. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Kara. Doug, is the anti-bullying policy yours?
No, it's
When?
Wins.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I was requested to draft an anti-bullying policy for consideration and adoption by the council. Do you
steal that cord? So
okay.
Pull that up for you.
So just a little bit of background. Workplace bullying can have severe consequences for both targets of bullying and the organization at large. There can be consequences in terms of staff turnover, lost productivity, inability to respond to deal with new and important community priorities. So we were directed to write a policy that supports a sense of decorum at the City Council meeting, identifies potential bullying practices, and provides council members with a policy and procedure to prohibit bullying in the workplace. And I will say that currently in the city staff personnel policies, we do have a policy, an anti-harassment and a respectful workplace policy that incorporates some of what has been put into the anti-bullying policy, but as part of our review of the staff personnel policies, we'll be taking a fresh look at that and updating that. So this policy was crafted also with that in mind for the future. There were 2 amendments that were suggested proposed by Councilmember Gregory, and so you see those in the staff report. So with that, I don't really have anything more to say. I assume you've all read the...
could you put the bullying policy up on the screen?
So it does provide the guiding principles, the policies, and then some potential remedies that you could consider at a future meeting. Remedies are on the second page.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Gregory, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to say I am in full support of this. I don't think anybody should be bullied. I think this is a good policy. However, under the current circumstances of this council, we are deeply divided on issues. We have very contentious debates. And this anti-bullying policy, I don't think is going to help that in any way. And I, quite frankly, I don't want this fight tonight. I don't want it at all. I don't think it's going to help our situation at all. I think the current policies that are in place are sufficient for now. But I would like to make a motion to table this until after the election, after the new council gets seated, whoever is seated after in January. Postpone this until the second meeting of January. I'm going to make a motion to postpone the anti-bullying policy until the second meeting of January of 2019.
I'll second that motion. Any discussion?
Yeah, I think it's a legal liability. It's actually a legal liability for the city to not have this type of a guiding principle that addresses both its board as well as staff. I was the one that requested this policy. I am in disagreement with Councilmember Gregory's amendments, an attempt to slide this out of the way. Whether or not there is a need or a desire to address the press or any other individual or organization, for that matter, has no bearing on whether there's an anti-bullying policy or not. What it does guide is how to respond to those situations and under what guiding principles you may do so. You're always free to raise a difference. This guides how you do so. The second suggestion is that we have city code that says who can offer a motion and or the number of votes required for censure, and we should not differentiate this from that city code. And so I think that this puts us in legal liability if you table this for now.
I agree with Council Member Crowley. We need this policy. I don't think we should kick it down the alley. There's no reason to. The amendments proposed by Councilor Gregory are improper, in my opinion. So I think we should vote on the policy as written tonight.
Well, first off, we have a motion on the table to delay this. At this point, I'm going to call for a vote on that. All in favor of delaying this until January of 19, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
That motion fails. Cindy, hang on a second. Cindy, hang on. Please wait a second. Cindy, did you get that? All right, now please proceed.
I move we approve the policy as written and recommended by staff without the recommended amendments by council members.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, before you vote on this, I was asked by Sue Orson to read a letter into the record that she presented to me on Sunday, and she's unable to attend the meeting tonight, and I told her that I would read it into the record. It says, my response to Victoria City Council agenda item number 9B dated May 29, 2018. In reviewing the May 29 City Council packet, I was alarmed to see Councilmember Tom Gregory's bold attempt to harm and discredit me through a written city policy. His proposed amendment to a draft anti-bullying policy reads as follows: Council may publicly renounce false or blatantly misleading statements meant to defame or malign any council member which are printed in the Victoria Gazette or the Chanhassen Villager. Surely Councilmember Gregory is aware that several other newspapers have been reporting the doings in Victoria. Are those other papers off the hook? I have 3 points to make. One, the proposed Gregory Amendment authorizes the City Council to judge my intent, insinuating that I would mean or intend to defame or malign. My intent is explicitly stated at the bottom of page 5 in each issue of the Gazette for all to know and read. Quote, my intent is to inform and shine a light on reality in season and out of season as charitably as possible. 2, the proposed Gregory Amendment is implicit, if not directly accusatory. The reality is that the Gazette does not defame or malign, but there are City Council members who defame and malign themselves and others through their own words and actions. I simply report in the Victoria Gazette what is said and done at the City Council meetings, practically verbatim. I can't make up that stuff. 3, the proposed Gregory Amendment seeks permission for what is already permitted. Council members already have the freedom to publicly renounce false or blatantly misleading statements. Unfortunately, there is also a perceived freedom in recent times to publicly renounce true and honest statements as well as to publicly twist reality. In conclusion, Councilmember Gregory's proposed amendment to the draft anti-bullying policy is, in of itself, a bullying tactic, and I take it as a personal attack because, unlike other newspapers, I am the Victoria Gazette. Susan Orson, Victoria Gazette.
Councilmember Gregory, would you like to respond?
Certainly. Here's a copy. This bullying policy was first produced or first suggested at our last meeting. And here's a copy of last month's Victoria Gazette. During the workshop of March 12th, which is there's reporting from the March 12th meeting and also the March 26th meeting are both in the last month's Gazette. During a workshop, this is what was printed in the Victoria Gazette. Councilmember Striegel spoke directly to Councilmember Gregory. Quote, you failed to honor your agreement that you'd go along with an Attorney General's opinion and a not to exceed dollar amount. Everything about that statement is blatantly false. Immediately following your false statement, I produced about a 1.5-minute rebuttal from that blatantly false and slanderous statement. A 1.5-minute rebuttal. And out of that 1.5-minute rebuttal, not one quote appeared in the Victoria Gazette. Ms. Orson only found space for your false and slanderous statement, and not one quote from that 1.5-minute rebuttal that refuted each and every part of that false and slanderous statement. If we're going to have an anti-bullying policy, it should include the Victoria Gazette to stop this kind of nonsense. That tactic was blatantly false and dishonest journalism, and for Ms. Orson to read that statement into the record in and of itself shows what kind of a bully Ms. Orson is. If we're going to have an anti-bullying policy, the Victoria Gazette needs to be part of that.
There is a vote on the floor, and there's a second.
If I could, I would like to respond.
I understand.
I call the question.
Gentlemen,
there's no debate.
No.
I call the question.
Gentlemen, there's a valid motion on the floor. It's an opportunity for discussion. I think Councilmember Striegel has an opportunity, should have an opportunity to
I
respond.
call the question, Mayor.
Overruled.
There is no discussion on a call to question. Robert's Rule of Order supersedes.
Well, calling a question, we've talked about this before, is effectively a motion to close debate. It has to be voted on. So when you call the question, the body gets to vote on whether the question is called and there's no more debate. So it's a motion to close debate.
He's called the question. All in favor of closing debate signify by saying.
Ask for a second, I think.
Does the question have to get seconded?
No, it does not.
Yeah, I didn't think it
Mayor
did.
and Council, I don't know the answer without reading over
So
that. I wouldn't
require
require that, though.
You know what? for sake of argument, I'll second the question. All in favor of closing debate signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay.
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 All right. Question is overruled. Councilmember Striegel, go ahead and respond. Please.
First of all,
Please.
Councilmember Gregory, you are completely wrong. You are completely wrong. My statement was accurate. I can refer to the video if you would like to.
I've got the timestamp.
But
Gentlemen, one at a time. Thank you. Please
I
proceed.
stand by my words. You did fail, but that's beside the point. This is a policy about the council, the staff, and the human resources within the city of Victoria. If you don't like something that's printed in a paper, I think you should take that up with the paper. And your beef is not with Sue Orson, it's with me. So take it up with me.
May I comment?
Go ahead.
There was a comment a moment ago suggested that just came up at the last meeting, and I requested that this be drafted in January. And I provided a sample of here's one that I've seen before from a corporate standpoint, and here's another one that I've seen from, I think I got it from like the National League of Lawyers or something like that. And I did not provide any direction to staff other than I think we need such a policy, and I provided them with that background, and they have produced what is, in my opinion, a very good document. Including the procedure and remedies. Those are all recommendations by staff. And again, I fully support what they've put in place.
So my concern is this is entirely subjective as to what that is. I support the concept of anti-bullying, but my concern is this is simply going to be used to try to squish or squash dissenting opinions on topics. And then if, in fact, we start asking hard questions, which I believe is part of our duty to ask hard questions and dig into issues and explore them, this policy can be used to try to stifle that kind of debate, and I don't think the public wins in that. So I'm not opposed to an anti-bullying policy. I'm opposed to a policy that's subjective, especially given the makeup of the council as it is today, because I guarantee you there's going to be questions that come up where there's going to be a disagreement, and then somebody's going to say, oh, well, that's bullying, therefore that individual in the heat of the moment is then all of a sudden going to be censured and sanctioned, and I think that's being abused by this council. So the concept's fine. This policy, it's too subjective. There's not enough guidelines, and I don't know how to address that specific issue. I haven't seen other policies. That's my comments. Is there other comments by the council?
Yeah, so my comments were directly responding to Councilmember Gregory, but with respect to the policy itself, again, I like it in its existing format. I think the two proposed amendments they're completely irrelevant with respect to what the purpose of this document is. I've never been associated with any organization that was a better example of why this kind of policy is needed. It is, in the corporate world, part of an overall hostile workplace, hostile work environment, kind of suite of policies around different kinds of discrimination and harassment and persistent treatment. And, we could go through some emails, too, if we wanted to, where the condescension and the unprofessional, dismissive of people who are here because of their expertise and paid for that expertise, but it differs from the narrative that they'd like to put forward, so they just try to shut it down. So I think that, to me, is the bigger benefits of this. And we don't have to look any further than the last 18 months. We've lost the entire Victoria for a Lifetime Commission. We lost a very valuable, very qualified, very credentialed member of the Planning Commission. You can't begin to wonder why residential development applications and proposals are just about gone. You can't begin to ask about why some of the downtown development stuff is gone. You can't look at the attendance at the committee and commission meetings and wonder why it's gone. You can't look at the loss of some of the best staffers that we've had, Lori Hoken and Ben Landhauser and Aaron Smith, and know that every one of those wasn't because they sat there and watched their personal reputations being unfairly tarnished and looking at their careers ahead of them and saying, I got nothing that I want to spend, I want nothing to do with this organization. I can't think of any better examples of a place where this kind of policy is needed than right here.
We have a valid motion on the table to approve this policy without Councilmember Gregory's two motions. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed signify by saying nay. Nay. Cindy, did you get that? Okay. Next item, Doug.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
We just took a vote. You didn't pronounce that the motion had...
She said she got it. It was approved 3-2. She got it.
She got it, but...
Yep. Yep. All right,
Didn't
for the
say
record, yeah, it passes on a 3-2 vote. Thank you. Next, Doug.
Mr. Mayor, I have several announcements I want to make. First of all, I learned today that Victoria Flats is now 100% rented. They're pretty excited about that. It's not 100% occupied yet, but they rented the last couple of units in the last few weeks, and it's been a very successful project for them. Secondly, I placed on your table tonight an additional report from the Sheriff's Department. The council had requested information about the community contacts that the Sheriff's Department has been able to make, and you can see by that report that in the one period there were 213 community contacts, and in the period from 8/17 to 5/18 there were 265 community contacts, or 109 hours of officers not just patrolling but making contacts with community members in various ways. So I think they've upped their effort to do that, and I think that's a good thing for the community. Thirdly, I'd like to report from the Sheriff's Department that they are finding more and more people leaving their garage doors open at nighttime. Our sheriffs, as they patrol, they go around and they will actually close people's garage doors for them if they're able to. But it's a very important reminder to everybody that it's important, and especially in the summertime when people are out more, to close the garage door and prevent the possible theft. So we're just trying to reduce that. We don't have a rash of thefts, but it certainly
thank them.
is something. Excuse me?
Please thank them.
So they do it, and they will continue. But in the last 2 weeks, they had 32 garage doors that were open.
Wow.
So it's a problem.
Thank you.
Thirdly, the sprinkler ban is now in effect in Victoria. Just want to remind people what that is. It's on from May 1st to September 30th. If you own an odd number address, you can only sprinkle on odd number days. If you own an even number address, you can only sprinkle on even number days. And you can no sprinkling between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. It's really not very effective anyway, but this is a requirement that we have on our ordinance. We will issue citations for people that we find not abiding by those regulations. If somebody is establishing a new yard, if they come in the city, we will give them a permit to do that. They can sprinkle every day for some period of time. There's no cost for that permit. So that's, if they have that problem, please do it. Otherwise, sprinkling every day is not really anything that's going to help your garden that much. So we just urge you to abide by that ordinance. And finally, Mr. Mayor, I'm just reporting to you that I'm going to pay legal fees for the current legal problems with the open meeting law in the amount of $18,213.55.
Shouldn't that be included on the agenda items?
It's our determination that it was not necessary.
Who's our? Who is our? Who is us?
I did.
All right, so you're, all right. All right, how much is the amount?
$18,213.55.
Well,
we
we've
have a
discussed.
$20,000 limit on approving expenditures, and that's what that is.
We also have a city policy for $10,000, and the city council, 3 of us voted to not pay those, but that's a discussion for another time. Bob? Any reports? I'm sorry, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Bob?
Mayor, I have nothing to report, thanks.
Councilmember Crowley?
Yeah, I did
Reports?
something I wanted to bring up. I forgot to ask, it's been over a month now, where are we at on Lakeside Drive? And here's my concern. If it's continuing to settle, I think we need an alternative plan.
The surcharge has been started removal.
Wow.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, I'm very happy to get to say that. Yes, they are working towards our July 9th deadline.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I ask, are you confident that it's being done from an engineering appropriate standpoint, not from a political pressure standpoint?
From an engineering perspective, we might wait like 10 more years for it to keep settling more. So we're removing the surcharge, we're building the street, but I am reviewing how the proposed street is going to be constructed to decide if we want to modify any of our standards.
I mean, I'm worried about maintenance issues
Correct.
on this street and the expense to the city going forward if we push it.
It's the right time to take it off based on how the settlement has decreased. But given that concern, I'm contemplating whether we would do something like delay installing concrete curb and gutter on it.
Kara, let me jump in. This is an important topic for a lot of people. Let's add this to an agenda item for the next council meeting for a short briefing because there's more. It's late and people may not be hearing this. We need to get it on the agenda so the public knows, and then give that short briefing. Fair enough?
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Crowley, anything else?
Nope.
Councilmember Striegel?
No report.
Councilmember Vogt?
No report.
Councilmember Gregory?
No report. I'm good.
I have none. I move we adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.